Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special presentation of Final Fantasy Randomizer. We're here with the Winter Duckling Boot Camp. I'm Ale Mark, and joining me tonight is Jat2980. He's going to be doing I guess we can call it commentary. We're going to be kind of talking about the Randomizer. We're going to be watching Sir Link-a-Lot do a run-through. He's going to be our Duckling Supreme. Our reigning one is going to be doing our walkthrough of the flags tonight, showing everybody kind of how it goes. Got Darkman doing our restream for us tonight, so just getting all the good stuff out of the way at the start. So, Jat, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. I've honestly been looking forward to the Duckling program getting kicked off for the winter season for like the last 2 months. So I'm hoping we can put on a great show, and everyone out there can learn a little bit about the Randomizer and take something away, whether they're like brand new or someone who's been playing for the last few months with us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely a nice way to start off. I mean, for anyone who maybe missed our spring/summer boot camp that we held back in the May-June timeframe, the boot camp is really to help bring our new players up to speed. If you've maybe seen some of the races, but you haven't quite dipped your toes in, if you've looked at the website and you've just seen the giant mass of options you have, and you're just like, nah, I'm good, I'll figure this out later. Now it's later. That's what we're here to do tonight. So we're going to go through, we're going to kind of show everybody how everything works.
I think Ale might have just had a quick technical difficulty, but basically what he was saying is if you just dipped your toes in, if you watched a race but you've always wanted to get started, figure out what's going on, this is the perfect time to step in. Is not only will you have other players out there helping out in a similar situation as you will also get tons of veteran support. Everyone comes in to help out with commentary, talking to the various Ducklings, part of the Duckling Pond, watching your siege, watching your streams, watching you race, and helping out in the Duckling spoilers as well when you run the weekly. So if you haven't gotten started, welcome, and I hope that you enjoy your evening. If you have any questions at all, more than any other time, we would love some interaction in chat tonight. Feel free to ask your questions. If we don't know it directly, or we don't want to talk about that topic quite yet, we'll make sure that we follow up in the Duckling Pond, or just send a message in chat, even if we don't talk about it in broadcast. So this is definitely a time where we want everyone to be able to be engaged and ready to learn a little bit. So with no further ado, Ale, you back?
I hope so. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back. We're
excellent. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, so.
Yeah, no problem. So with no further ado, we're going to get started with our flag set review. So this is something unique. Obviously, during races, we are not going to do a flag set review, but what we want to do is take you a little bit through what you're going to be looking at when you pull up your first Duckling Weekly. Final Fantasy Randomizer is a little bit intimidating. There's a lot of flags, but we will guide you through the most important ones for this first week.
Yeah, exactly. And, if you are hanging out with us in chat and you're just like saying, okay, well, how do I find this beautiful, beautiful randomizer site? Excuse me. Just check out Moobot there. He's got FinalFantasyRandomizer.com. Link is right there in chat. You can click that. You hit the randomize button right at the top, and you'll be on the same screen that we're on. And you can kind of play along with us at home.
Awesome. So, when you hit the randomize button, this is what you'll be greeted with, and I do want to point out a few small things. So first off, you will need a Final Fantasy 1 ROM, and unfortunately we cannot help you get that, but you do want the US version, or else you will not be able to do that. So the first thing you're going to be doing is uploading that ROM right there. A couple other things on the top. Always click Remember ROM once you do it, otherwise you're going to have to upload it every time. And then two other important concepts that you'll see here. One is the flag string. For now, you don't need to worry too much about that, but just know that that corresponds to what boxes are checked. It doesn't correspond to how the items are located or anything like that, but it corresponds to the flags. And what the flags are is not the particular instance of what you're watching or playing. Instead, it's the logic, what's being randomized, and all that stuff. So that's what the flags represent. On the other hand, the seed, that is the specific instance of the flags that you're playing, and as long as all the players who are racing have the same seed and the same flags, they're going to be racing the exact same thing. Now, Rando's going to Rando. You're not going to get the same scripts, you're not going to get the same skills, you're not going to get the same spells cast against you. Boss RNG is not going to be the same, but you'll be on a fairly even playing field. Anything you want to add, Ale?
No, that's just it. Just, I guess the only thing I would want to add to, and just kind of expanding on what you just mentioned, is when you're running the randomizer, the randomization logic is based off a combination of both the seed and the flags. So you can take the flags and you can have umpteen 100,000 million different seeds. Yeah, sure, they might be similar because there's only so many ways to place things within the game. But you're going to have differences in every single seed, and that's how that seed handles it.
So scrolling down a little bit, we're not going to cover presets for right now, but just know that this is a great way to get started on various different things once you want to explore a little bit. But for the first week of the Duckling bootcamp, you're not going to have to worry about any flags, as you're going to be given a link. So don't worry too much about that particular section. Scrolling down, though, here's our first major section. Ale, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. So part of the randomizer, we have it broken up into different sections on the site. So the first section that we're letting the randomizer do to the ROM is going to be the shops, the spells, and the RNG. So there's a whole mess of different options in here. We're not going to touch on what every single one does tonight. Over the course of the 8 weeks of boot camp, we're going to have different combinations of these turned on to try out different flag sets, and we'll talk more in depth about them at those particular times when we get to them for each week. So for tonight, we're just going to look at the ones that have the green check mark on it. If you're curious about exactly how something works and we don't touch on it, for every single flag here that we have across every single section, there's that itty-bitty little question mark box to the right of it. You can go and click on any of those question mark boxes. It'll bring up a tooltip box for you. That way you can kind of see exactly what it changes within the randomizer if you want to kind of see how things work, again, if we haven't touched on it. So for tonight, within the section that we're doing, because again, this is the first week, we want to break all our new players in. We want to kind of assume you maybe played the vanilla game, whether it was yesterday, whether it was 25 years ago, whenever it was, we want you to know, hey, this is what we're changing. So what we're changing is shops. We're shuffling all the shops in the game, but they're all going to stay within their same category. So weapon shops will have any contents of any other weapon shop will be all shuffled around. Armor shop will all be shuffled around. Item shops will all be shuffled around. So those are going to be maybe in different places. Like, hey, maybe you'll find the cat claw in Canaria. Maybe you'll find the gold bracelet in Elfland. The only way to know is going to be to obviously run the seed and see kind of what the RNG gives us for that particular seed. So there are a couple things that are set though. So like I believe we have it set where you'll always have pure and soft potions available in Canaria. That way you don't feel like locked out by poison or have, forced to carry around some statued party members with you until you find a town that's magically selling these potions. So those will always be kind of there as like a safety net for everybody. Another big thing that's shuffled up is our magic levels. So you start the vanilla game, you've got maybe lit, fire, a couple other level 1 spells. I can't even tell you what the vanilla level 1 spells are anymore. But what we're doing is we take all the spells, we put them in a bag, kind of like Scrabble, we just start dishing them out. We say, hey, Nuke, you're going to be level 1 today. We might say, hey, Life 2, you're going to be level 5 today. We might say, hey, Brack, you're going to be level 8 today. It's really fun to play with. It definitely kind of changes it up, and there's all the fun and the logic in the game to where that's how you got to kind of handle the seed. As you can see on the little tooltip there, it does talk about the keep permissions flag. We're not going to mess with that tonight. Just know that as we're going through the seed, when we get to certain magic spots, we'll be talking more about who can learn what with the party that Sir Link-a-Lot is going to run. But for the most part, just know that if it's a black mage, he's going to be able to learn everything. If it's a white mage, they can learn everything. It's not going to be required to rely on what class or what promotion they could learn in the vanilla game.
Yeah, for sure. I want to chime in on a couple concepts I want to quickly touch on before we get started in the actual flag set. Well, we'll talk exactly what's going on, but there's kind of two different things to understand. There's both levels and slots in each level, and they actually work independently. So in Final Fantasy, each level, this does not work on your traditional mana system. This is working at level by level. You're going to gain spell charges. So for level 1, for example, your mages are going to start with 2 level 1 spell charges. And that means that all level 1 spells you buy, regardless of what they are, they could be level 1 fire, ice, sap, slow, level 1 nuke. Regardless of what they are, you're going to be using those level 1 spell charges. So that's what a level is. Now, slots are only important for who can learn what. So each spell level, it matters if the spell is listed first or last, unlike in a lot of games. Because in the vanilla game, for example, the red mage could not learn the spell that was in the second slot of white magic at level 1. And we'll get into the exact details, but you do need to pay attention to the order because it impacts what spells the mages can learn at various levels. So just a couple things to keep in mind. So if we say levels, that's that. If we say slots, that's exactly what order they're in the spell shops.
Yep, exactly. And like we mentioned, is once Link is doing the seed, and he'll stop into each shop, and we'll take a minute to look at it and tell you, hey, here's anything that's special about it. The last flag that we're looking at within that top section is going to be the RNG tables. So normally, the vanilla game, there's a lot of people out there who are speedrunning it. I know there's a number of people out there who have gotten like all the frame perfect inputs down now for a lot of the world records. So what we do is we take all the battle RNG, we take the encounter table, we take all that, we jumble it around. So all the little, it's 7 steps to an encounter, it's 3 steps to an encounter that you might see in the vanilla game. Yeah, that's out the window. You're kind of learning as you go. You've got to kind of see what the seed is throwing at you as you're playing it. And then again, this will be different for each seed because we've got this RNG table box checked in here.
Yeah, but keep in mind that just because the RNG table box is checked means it's different from the vanilla game, but it is consistent within it, and we'll be using that maybe in some later weeks to explain some more advanced concepts like encounter manipulation. But just know that, yes, the RNG is shuffled, but it's still manipulatable, just not in the memorize it before the seed starts phase.
Correct.
Scrolling down to enemies. So of course, enemies being randomized is one of the most important parts of the randomizer. We've changed a lot of things. Only a couple things are mentioned here. There's also their stats, their HP. Those are all shuffled, which we'll get into below. But for right now, the most important things to know are their formations, how their spells, scripts, and status touches are impacted, as well as trap tiles. So I'll start with the formations. So formations, the first spell that you're seeing there is Shuffle Unrunnable Formations. And what that means is that what was unrunnable in the original game is not necessarily going to continue to be unrunnable in this game. So for example, in Sea Shrine, there's an infamous unrunnable pack, the Wizaheg Arsaheg pack. That is not necessarily going to be unrunnable, and that's really the only difference. Now, there's another flag down below that has changed unrunnable run to wait, which is very, very convenient, as you'll know when you can't run. But that's really all this flag does, and it's not going to be a huge impact. Just, don't click wait if you're trying to get away. Moving on to Shuffle Surprise bonus, this means that the same enemies that are good at ambushing you or being ambushed in the vanilla game are no longer going to be. And once again, this is just something that's going to come up. It changes the game a little bit, but nothing that you can really plan around too much until you learn who's got a high ambush rate, for example. So not a major impact to your randomizer experience. The last one in this section that I want to touch on is Shuffle Rarity. So in this particular flag set, the encounter zones are not shuffled, which means you're not going to all of a sudden run into, Rng Kilos in Canaria. However, the rarity of them is changed. So, for example, something that might be very, very rare, like gas dragons in the waterfall, now could be much more common because the encounter rarities are shuffled. So don't worry, once again, too much about these. All these flags, they definitely change the way the game's played, but you're not going to modify too much about your plan, other than realizing when there's a nasty unrunnable, you might want to try and avoid that. Ale, you want to talk about the next section?
Yeah, and then just kind of to piggyback off what you just said, just because an encounter is more rare and more dangerous in the vanilla game doesn't mean it's going to be more rare or more dangerous here in the randomizer, because the next 3 boxes we have are going to be Shuffle Scripts, which takes all in the vanilla game, every enemy is assigned a script. So like the Gurmadeuses always do the same thing every time you load up the ROM. Perilous always do the same thing every time you load up the ROM. So what we've done with Shuffle Script is it says, hey, we're going to take the Imp script, we're going to put it over here on the Worms. And we're going to take the Nightmare script, and we're going to put it over here on the Gur-Imps. And everything else is the same. So all the vanilla skills and spells carry over with it with this particular flag. So that way, in combination with shuffling the rarity, hey, maybe those gas dragons aren't going to be so nasty. Maybe all they do is bite you. So it's a nice way to kind of keep things fresh. Now, we're going to take that, we're going to twist it a little bit, though, because on top of shuffling those scripts, well, now we're going to totally shuffle their skills and spells. So now it's kind of like Whose Line. It's like the scripts are shuffled, but they don't really matter anymore because now all of a sudden, hey, everything is tossed around. So this is kind of done in 3 different pools, though. So as you can see here on the screen from the tooltip, all the random encounters have 1 pool of skills and spells. The first Fiend fights have a 2nd pool of skills and spells, and then the second Fiend fights, which is all the Topher fights plus Chaos, and Warmech share a pool. So that gets more useful a little bit later on once you start getting into the randomizer, once you start learning, especially like with the last pool with the Topher fights, what skills and spells are in those pools and what it means when you see something on a certain enemy. So we'll talk more about that later in the coming weeks, but just know that with this particular flag on, coupled with the shuffle scripts, just about anybody can have anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been around the community, you might have seen people talk about like imps with nuke. Yeah, that's a thing.
Yep.
They might be talking about, Garogers with stone poison. Yeah, sure, it can happen. So it all just depends on what the seed decides to throw at you at any given time with the flags. The last thing here, go ahead, Jet.
I was just going to say, to quickly touch on the impact this has on when you're playing, what this generally does is makes vanilla spellcasting enemies weaker and vanilla non-spellcasting enemies tougher. So that is why a lot of the time we talk about, coupled with the shuffled status attacks flag, sorcerers, eyes, Medusas, they're all a lot weaker than they are in the vanilla game, generally speaking, because they need to get their scripts and spells randomized back onto them, versus other enemies who might originally have done nothing. Now they can all of a sudden have stun touch. So that's a big impact on the randomizer and something that you definitely want to watch out for.
Yeah, exactly. And then kind of like what Jet was just mentioning, with shuffling around those touch effects, all the hated enemies that you have in the vanilla game, well, they may not be so hated anymore. Like, you might not see all the death touch. It might show up on Gurumps, and maybe you never see a Gurump in your run, so you never know what has it. So the combination of these 3 flags basically make all the enemies for each seed random, so you never know what they're going to get until they actually use it on you, or you run into them and they say, hey, I've got heat. Let me ruin your day because you're level 1. So the last tile, or the last checkbox here, is we shuffle all trap tiles. So what this one does is the trap tiles, or the spike tiles, if we want to call them, are going to be those tiles you can walk on in the game that force you to enter a fight. So there's a couple infamous ones. You start the game, you're told, hey, you've got to go get this crown out of marsh. You walk down, you find this lovely box with rocks around it. You walk up and wizards attack you and they kill you. And every single time you load up the no game, you always step on that tile, there's always wizards there. Well, that's one of the spike tiles. There's a couple other infamous ones like the Eye Fight in Ice, the Hall of Giants in Earth. So what we've done is we've taken all those trap tile locations, or the spike tile locations, we just kind of scattered them around differently. So now instead of walking into Marsh and maybe seeing wizards, maybe you walk down there and say you see the Gurworms, like you're seeing kind of here in the tooltip. Maybe you walk in there and you see the Wiz Mummy pack when you decide to go in there and dig out the floater box. So it just kind of shuffles them around. So there's some things that this tile means with regards to actually progressing through the game, and I believe we're going to be talking about that as we're going through a little bit later tonight when Link is actually doing his run.
But generally, what impact this has on gameplay is that it's going to make the earlier dungeons, especially ones with mandatory spike tiles, a little bit more dangerous, because you're going to get later game enemies generally, and it's generally going to make the later game dungeons a little bit easier for their spike tiles. This all being said, the major impact in a lot of cases is actually when you're looking for a grind, is that you don't know exactly where it is. And that's going to play into later flags that's more than this particular one. For this one, it's going to be more like, wow, I had to dive Marsh at level 5. I hope there's not something really nasty on that spike tile.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on to treasures and incentives. So I think we'll quickly touch on treasures, item shuffle, and freebies, but I really want to spend some time talking about what loose items means, and we'll get to that in a second. So item shuffle treasures means all the boxes in the game, with the exception of a couple special ones, which we'll get to in a second, are all shuffled together. So, where you got the vanilla, a heal pot in the vanilla game, all of a sudden there might be gold, or there might be a rapier, or there might be, dragon armor. So all the boxes in the game have all been shuffled around, and there's no weighting to it necessarily, with the exception of the incentivizers, which we'll get to in a second. So, you could open up a dragon armor in the very first box. You could open up a katana in the first box, or you can open up gold in one of the most difficult to get to chests in the game, the vanilla masa chest. So that's basically what that flag's going to do.
Yeah, so just to kind of jump in and add to this too. So if you remember back to the first flag, we looked at the shops. That particular shop flag didn't add anything to the shops. This particular treasure flag doesn't add anything to the treasures. All the vanilla treasures are still somewhere in the game. They're just not in their normal spot.
Moving on to main NPC items and fetch quest rewards. So what this does is it adds all the kind of vanilla important items, key items in other RPGs to the shuffled pool. Now, these two flags don't necessarily say where they're going to show up. It just says that they're added to the shuffle, so they're not going to be in their vanilla location, which means, for example, you're not necessarily going to get the loot from Princess Sarah or the ship from Mickey. But depending on the other flags, that will determine where they show up, but it adds those into the pool, so they're not very vanilla. And the same thing with the fetch quest rewards. What those do, thank you, Darkwing. What those do is those shuffle what is returned. So instead of the herb always leading to the key, or whatever it is in the vanilla game, and the TNT leading to the canal. Instead, the herb could lead to nothing. Or the herb could lead to another one. So the herb could lead to the TNT, which leads to the Masamune, for example. So once again, this just makes that the vanilla fetch quests aren't in play. Depending on the other flags, in this case, we're going to be dealing with ones which make sure that all the vanilla fetch quests turn into something valuable, if not what they do in the vanilla game. Yeah, so that's basically how those are going to work. These ones are a little bit confusing, but they're going to be checked in most situations, so don't worry too much about them. The locations and items flags that you see to the right are going to be much more important for the vast majority of flag sets that you play. The last one is Free Bridge. Free Bridge is pretty explanatory. You get it for free. Yay! What this does is it opens up a little bit early game routing choices. Without the bridge, you kind of have no choice but to kill Garland first. So now that you have a free bridge, you can go to Provoca potentially before you kill Garland, and that's the biggest impact it has. You can also, of course, check Matoya and various things like that, but the big one is that you can go to Provoca first if you choose to, and that is important.
Yeah, and there's some other aspect of that we'll talk about when we're running the seeds. We're just going to put a pin in that. So let's jump over to locations and items. So this was the big one that, Jet and I want to focus on. So this is really the part of the randomizer that can really throw people off, especially if you're not familiar with what any of these particular options mean. So when you're looking at this, the main NPCs are the ones that are tied to the main NPC item with flag on the left-hand side. So these are going to be like the main ones that you speak to in your quest that just say, hey, you've done something, here's an item back. It's not the fetch quest, it's not the chain NPC. So this is going to be like the king, the princess, Sarah, Vicky, the sage in Crescent Lake, Sarda, and then the waterfall robot. So what this means is that when paired with the flag on the left-hand side, these NPCs will always give you an item from this right-hand column underneath the items header. So any of those main NPCs can potentially give you, they might give you the floater, they might give you the masa, they might give you one of the fetch quest items. And then same thing here with the fetch quest NPCs. So this will be like Astos, Matoya, Narek, the Smithy McBeardsword, the Dwarven Blacksmith who gives you the Excal, the Fairy. All of these guys are now shuffled and they say, hey, these guys can now give you anything as well.
Yeah, so for the most part, I'd say in 95% of flags you play, but for the Duckling Bootcamp, all the flags that you play, both of these, as well as main NPC items and fetch quest awards are going to be turned on, which makes it quite consistent in terms of you're usually going to get an item of value from all the fetch quest turn-ins, as well as the King, Sarah, all the main NPCs. So you can trust on that to be kind of consistent throughout the Duckling Bootcamp. And that just means these are always going to be something that's critical to your routing. You're always going to want to consider these people when you're making your decisions.
Yeah, and if you're ever stuck, you just have to go back and think, hey, maybe I forgot to talk to one of these guys, or maybe I have access to one of these people that I haven't gone and seen yet. And 9 out of 10 times, that's the answer to, hey, where's my progression hiding out on me?
So moving on to something that we really want to talk about now that we've kind of covered. Oh, I do want to quickly touch on items. So main progression items, other quest items, floater, canoe, ship, canal, tail. These are all, or not tail so much, but these all are kind of the key items that you're going to need to win in most seeds. So everything that's below kind of the paragraph break is your like core key items. They're not really gear. They're almost all required to win in most cases, with the exception of the tail. So those are also going to be checked for the vast majority of flag sets that you play, unless they are free. In which case they might still be checked, but then they just don't do anything because you're get them for free. So that just, this is going to be the bread and butter of the randomizer. But before I go into the locations and Masa Power Bomb being checked, I really want to pay attention to the numbers beside items and locations. So in the randomizer community, we've kind of gone into 3 main categories. We have flag sets with loose items, flag set with dud items, and flag sets with neither. So no dud, no loose, or 0. And how you're going to calculate that is just a simple subtraction. So if there are more items than locations, that means that there's 2, in this case, leftover items that cannot be put into an incentive location. That means those 2 items just get put into the general treasure shuffle and are therefore loose items, or items that we can find in any random treasure chest. And in this case, we have 2 of them. Now, of course, those 2 items aren't necessarily required, because, for example, they could be the Masamune and the Power Gauntlet, in which case you could absolutely win without opening any extra chests, but in most seeds you're going to need to. So that is really, really important information to get right up front, and one of the first flags you should check. On the other hand, if the location count is greater than the item count, that means that there's less items than you have than important chests, which means you're going to put some non-important items in those important chests, and those are dud items. So for example, if we have 21 locations and 19 items, we'll have 2 dud ones, in which case they pull 2 treasures from the generic pool, and you might get 17 gold from Matoya, for example, or the princess will pass down for 2,000 years, 861 GP, as we kind of say there. So that's kind of how that works. Finally, if they're equal, that means that there's no dud items. You're just going to end up with every single incentive chest will have an important incentive item. It might not be mandatory to win the game, but that's how it's going to work. So hopefully that explanation made sense. Aelmar can put a much better explanation in chat, but that is going to be something that's absolutely critical. So always check if there are loose items or there are dud items.
Yep, exactly. And I think you summed up pretty well, so I don't think we need to really expand on that part any further.
The last thing that we have here is just the... Oh, sorry, Dark Moon. Just the other locations. So these are going to be important chests, and we'll point them out as we get to them. So Ice Cave, Ordeals, Marsh Cave, Titan's Trove, Canary Locked. Those are all important chests, which you're going to have to check the tooltips for. And finally, the Masamune and the Power Gauntlet, which are just other items that are added to the incentive pool. So for example, the critical thing to know here is that if you open the Masamune in just random chest, that is one of your 2 loose items that you found. So it's really important to recognize which pieces of gear are incentivized, especially if you're playing with loose items.
Correct. And yeah, that's something that will tend to throw newer runners off as well, is not realizing, or maybe just forgetting, like, hey, I thought we had the Masamune in this flag set. Why did it get out of a box? Oh, I still have 2 loose items to find. No, that Masa was a loose. So that's just one thing that comes with experience, is that recognition of the flag set. It's remembering, hey, here's what my loose items were. And then just being able to remember that when you're actually running the seed.
Awesome. So our goal is not changed. In order to win, we are going to need to defeat Chaos. In order to defeat Chaos, we are going to have to go back 2,000 years in the past, armed with 4 orbs, the key, and the loot. So that's pretty much it. We can move on from goal. We'll talk about that as we get going, but there's no changes there. A couple key things here to point out. Once again, we're only going to focus on the green checkboxes. Early open progression, if Dark Moon can open that up. What this means is that you can walk to the Dwarf Cave from Canaria, which is a little bit different than you would be able to do in the vanilla game. So that's important, and sometimes there's going to be a loose item in Dwarf Cave. Like, for example, there could be a loose ship in the 2 chests there. So this is a flag to pay attention to.
Yep, and then that also changes up the river system over there in between Ice Cave and Volcano, and we'll point that out when we're over there sailing around or paddling around, as it were, a little bit later on.
The 4 early items, so in the vanilla game, for example, you can't talk to the king until you save the princess, you can't talk to Sarda until you kill the vampire, you can't get the sage's items until you kill Lich, and you can't go to Ordeals before you have the crown. So those have all been removed. As soon as you can talk to these key NPCs, you can get their items, and that's a major change, so make sure that you remember this.
Yep, and then the other side of it too is early Ordeal. So normally it doesn't tell you this in the vanilla game, because I don't think there's any feasible way to get there without it. The throne room to activate Ordeals, get into the Pillar Maze, requires you to have the crown. So imagine our surprise when we started running this game and it's like, hey, you still need the crown to get in, because you're always going to have the crown at that point. So this makes it to where you can do Ordeals whether or not you have the crown.
And then the individual map edits, these are fairly small, but if you played the vanilla game, your memorization of the Ordeals pillars, not going to work, we've randomized it. Mm-hmm. The Titan's Trove has been moved, so more specifically, the Titan has been moved up 1 step so that he blocks access to the 4 treasure chests in the Titan's Trove unless you feed him the ruby. And this is important, as in this flag set, the Titan's Trove is incentivized, so you're going to want to get down there as early as possible. Unfortunately, you're going to need to wait until you have the ruby. And finally, Lefanish Hospitality just adds an inn and a place to revive dead characters to Lefane, which didn't have one in the vanilla game.
Yeah, so that's more quality of life. I mean, what kind of ancient civilization doesn't let travelers stay in their town?
Yeah.
I don't know. They're crazy. All right, so now that all that fun stuff's out of the way, now we're into the scaling part. So this is where the randomizer goes through and adjusts the values for everything in the game. So we're going to go through, we're going to change the prices for shop items in town, including magic. We're going to go through and change enemy stats around. We're going to kind of throw everything into a giant blender and just kind of make it work with these new scalings that we have here. So with the flags that we have tonight, we're not worrying about the little grayed outlines there, separate HP scaling. We're not doing separate HP scaling for the bosses tonight, or even for the vanilla mobs, I should say. Everyone's just going off of that mainline stats randomizer that we have there for their scale. So enemy stats will somehow fall between 50% to 200%, and then boss stats will all fall between 50 and 150%. So that means you might end up with a Chaos who has 1,000 HP. You might have an imp that, or pirates that have 14 HP, or thereabouts. I can't remember if there are 6 or 7 in the vanilla game. So all their other stats are also adjusted as well. So you might have a super evasive Chaos. You might have a Chaos that, I don't know, everybody can hit without even trying. So these takes all those vanilla stats, shuffles them up, and we're not going to know what we have until we're actually in fights with these various mobs throughout the game or bosses throughout the game, and we're kind of reacting to what we're seeing.
EXP and gold boost and progressive scaling. These are critical flags to really speed up the pace of this game. The vanilla version of this game is exceptionally slow to level. The randomizer, not so much. In almost all seeds, you'll see at least 2.0 experience, sometimes higher, like in this particular flag set. There's some details about how it all works, but basically the bigger the numbers, the faster you gain levels, and that's what you need to know for now. And this is relatively fast. Meanwhile, progressive scaling, what that does is as you get each item, you're going to get 5% more experience, and these are of course not all pieces of gear, just key items, and not counting the Masa and like the gear key items. So we scroll back up to the item section. So all the items above the line count, but all the items below do not. So don't think, hey, I found the Masa, I'm going to get some bonus experience. Now, I will say for new players, do not overestimate this. To be honest, the 5% doesn't make the biggest difference in the world. So if you can get levels early, generally speaking, get them. It's just important to know that this exists. Finally, the encounter rates, we've dropped them for this flag set. So this means that instead of the normal encounter rates, you're going to be getting 0.6 times the encounter rates on the overworld and 0.7 in the dungeon. And that's pretty self-explanatory. Not too much to speak of here. We'll get to this in perhaps later weeks, but for now, you can pick whatever you want, just like the vanilla game. Continuing on. Okay, so the only flags I want to touch on here is that, one, we fixed all of the bugs. Well, most of the bugs. You can argue some of them bugs or not, but for the most part, everything that didn't work in the vanilla game is now working critically. The most important one that people need to know about if they played the vanilla game is the crit rate bug has been fixed. So instead of using the index number, it now uses the actual crit rate, and this is overall a nerf to the weapons. Now, in exchange, we've doubled them. So that does help quite a bit, but you really, really need to keep in mind that that's occurred. So the X-Cal does not crit nearly as much as it did in the vanilla game, for example. The only other ones I want to identify here are the buy quantity flag set, which has changed how you're going to buy items in the shop, as well as NPC Guillotine, which lets you remove from the map any NPC that only has a single line of dialogue in the vanilla game. And this is really, really helpful for getting around those annoying bats. So those are two things just to keep in mind that really impact your gameplay experience. Everything else you're just going to basically kind of use by default, and I wouldn't worry too much about them. Anything else you want to add to that, Dale?
No, I mean, the only other thing I would add to it is going to be one of our, I don't want to call it more divisive flags, because I'm actually kind of coming around on it. But we've got auto-sort inventory on. So in the vanilla game, it always puts your loot first, and then it puts all your other key items. Then you've got your heal pot somewhere buried down there in the bottom line or two, all that other fun stuff. So with auto-sort enabled, heal, pure, and soft will always be across that top line if you have them. And then below that will be your 3 save items, so your tents, your cabins, and your houses, and then your key items start. So it kind of changes up how some of the more fancy things you can do at the end of the game. Like, if you've been a fan of the randomizer for a while, you may have seen a run where runners are, burning off save items before they enter the final dungeon. With this flag on, we don't even got to worry about that. Your heal pots are always the first thing. So it makes healing up your party with heal pots a little bit easier. for people who have been around for a while, it does kind of throw us off because we're used to never having heal pods there. Or like when you get to like the loot plate in Topher, you always have the loot in the first box, but now you've actually got to like, menu down a couple times for it. But that's really the only other flags that I'd say on there. Like everything that, like that category says, they're all conveniences.
Yeah.
And then below that is the...
Question
Oh,
for
go
everyone
ahead.
in the booth, I'm sorry. Will Sir Lancelot be playing with the multi-instrumentalist Sarah flag on?
Yes.
Okay, then we need to cover that.
Okay.
Excellent.
So go ahead.
yeah. No, that's fine. So bug fixes and rebalancing. So like Jet mentioned, we fixed all the nasty bugs that were hanging around in the vanilla game. We've also made the devs have made some decisions as to how they should be balanced, and that's where our balance column is over there. So we're not going to go and hit on every single bug fix on the left-hand side, but just understand that, in the vanilla game, the chance to run was horribly bugged. Like I think I can't even remember how it goes. The top slot character was using the run chance of like the fourth slot, and then the second and third were using some random inane number. Everyone has their own chance to run now. So fighter, maybe you'll run. Black Mage, you probably have a good chance to run. Thief is, see you later. We're always almost going to always be running. The armor bug for black belts was fixed. All that good stuff is done. So that's all been adjusted there. As far as some balance, some randomizer specific things that we've added in, I think the big one that I want to touch on is going to be the double thief and ninja hit percent growth. So this was I want to say more recent flag, given that the randomizer's been out for almost 5 years now. It's been around pretty much for the past year and some change. But this just makes it to where the hit percent for the thief grows a little bit better than it does in the vanilla game, because thief admittedly wasn't all that great. So this just makes him a more capable damage dealer if you decide, hey, I'm going to take thief and make him be my frontline guy. Now he'll actually be able to kind of put out a lot more damage than he would have been able to in the vanilla game.
Yeah, what this basically does is from level 20-ish onwards, the thief will outdamage the knight with most weapons, because they'll get their breakpoints earlier. So the thief is the more legitimate damage dealer, but is much more of a glass cannon and also gets black magic instead of white. So, yeah. The other one that you will see and that you should always check is the half black belt crit rate, which we have off right now. But if it's on, it's a pretty significant nerf to the black belt's prowess, as halving crit rate is obviously very, very serious. So just something to pay attention, as it really impacts the black belt's viability in some flag sets. Okay, and the last section that we need to touch on is fun percent. We are almost through this flag overview. For anyone who's a little bit more familiar, we thank you for sticking with us. We know that this is things that a lot of people are really familiar with, but we're hoping that if you've never seen this before, this gives you some idea about what these boxes do. So yeah, the only fun percent flag, I believe that, I don't know if Sir Lancelot has other things on, but the one that we want to touch on is multi-instrumentalist Sarah, as what that does is it will name the loot item any other instrument, basically. So if you see an instrument name or something that just isn't a name that you recognize, it's probably the loot. So just keep your eye out for that. Otherwise, there's other things that you can do here, but we will leave those for now.
Yeah, I think we put together a list of like 70 some odd items or instruments. When we were coming up with this flag throughout the Discord, everyone was kind of contributing to it, and it's great because it's different every single time. So one run you might get a double bass, the next run you might end up with a vuvuzela, the third run you might end up with like a limerick to break open the plate. So it's a lot of fun. It's just a fun little flag that has a little bit of a, at least it always gives me a chuckle, I should say.
The one instrument not in there being the chime, because that would be confusing with the actual chime.
Yes. Okay. And with that, we're pretty much ready to go. So our runner, Sir Lancelot, will get kickstarted here as he makes his initial party. Now, party selection is, of course, an important part of Randomizer strategy. Different flag sets are going to have different preferred ones, but Sir Lancelot's going to be going with what we kind of consider the gold standard for new player friendliness, which is the Fighter Rainbow. So what is that party, Ale?
That would be a fighter, a red mage, a white mage, and a black mage. So the nice thing about that is you have a strong, capable melee character in the fighter. You have a suitable backup melee in the red mage, and in some circumstances the white mage, but we'll probably not see the white samurai strats tonight. So you've got decent damage dealing options between two characters, and then because you're running with both a white and a black mage, you have access to all the magic. So after you promote, every single spell slot in the game is going to be open to your white and black mages in their respective spell slots, or their categories, I should say. And then the red mage still can learn magic as well, so they can kind of be a backup caster. So their utility is really going to be determined based on where the spells actually fall within the seed tonight.
Yeah. So there we go. We have the traditional fighter rainbow with slightly different sprites here than what you'll see normally, but that's just how Sir Lancelot prefers to go. And that's, of course, something that can be customized in the develop. If you want to learn more about that, you can check out the development section of our Discard. So yeah, Midna, the red mage, Nyla, the white mage, and Zelda, the black mage, as well as Link, our fighter. So with that, I think we're pretty much ready to go. Anything else you want to say before we get started here, Ale?
No, I just want to touch on one thing in chat. So Esper asking about the equipment symbols at the bottom of the main screen. So that's what we call the hash. So just to expand on what DBS and others are saying in chat. Whenever the seed gets rolled, if we're posting, say, like the weekly Duckling race, or you're participating in a race against other people in a live setting, people will frequently verify the hash. That's just a way for us to verify everyone's running the same exact seed. And so instead of just trying to hope that everyone's running the same exact actual seed itself, as well as the combination of the flag set, now we've got 8 characters down there of equipment pieces. And so you might say, like, okay, well, this shield's got, or this seed has for the hash, the shield, the helmet, the sword, the dagger, the knife, the axe, and then 2 more. So that's just a way you can kind of make sure it's an extra fail-safe to guarantee that you're running the same thing that everyone else is running.
Yep. If you want some more information on exactly how that works, you can also hit up the development section of our Discord. They'll be able to fill you in. It's probably an interpretation of the MD5 hash, but I'm not 100% sure. And with that, we will be off. So I will count you down, Sir Lancelot. Let's get started in 3, 2, 1, go.
And just to point out for everyone in chat, yes, Link is using some non-standard sprites. We call these, it's a mix of Valkyries of Light in here with the standard FF sprites. So in case you're looking at them going, those aren't normal, that's the reason why.
Alright,
Okay.
So first things first, we're going to go and check on the magic in the white magic shop. So we've got Invis in the first slot, we've got Cure 2 in the second slot, we've got Soft in the third slot, we have Cure 3 in the fourth slot. So with this magic, our white mage, who is our third character, can learn everything here because that's what they can learn in the vanilla game. The red mage, unfortunately, the only 2 spells they can currently learn in this shop are going to be Invis and Soft, because in the vanilla game, they can only learn the spells that were in the first and the third slot. If we need it, and if we have a spell slot still available for learning on the red mage, because each class is limited to learning 3 spells per level, once the red mage promotes into a red wizard, we can then learn the Cure 3 spell in that bottom slot. But again, that's going to be kind of dependent on where a couple other spells fall. But for now, the red mage probably not learning anything in here. The white mage can pick up a couple things, though.
And I will post a link in chat for the spell permissions for, if you want to get. That's also available on our Discord, but that is my favorite one for that. So Lancelot's going to pick up a couple things on the white mage, because the white mage can't learn any black magic, so might as well grab some healing. So quickly touching on what these spells do. Oh, that's all good. Oh,
I'm going to go back in there. I just wanted to...
So black magic. So black magic, luckily for us, black mage and red mage can learn all 4 slots at level 1 black magic. So we're looking good in terms of that. Now, in terms of what is good here, we actually have quite a few riches here. Lightning 3 is going to be our first major AoE sweeper. So each of the different elements, fire, lightning, and ice, have 3 levels of spells. Level 1 is a single target low damage dealer. Level 2 is an AoE low damage dealer. And level 3 is a AoE high damage dealer. And in most cases in the randomizer, you're only going to want to be looking for level 2 and level 3 spells of the elementals. Lit 3 is a particularly good one, especially in the early game, as a lot of things that are kind of water type, think your Pokemon charts, are weak to lightning. So that's definitely something that we're going to want to pick up. 2 other spells in here are kind of similar, Brack and Rub, although very different effectiveness. They have a small chance to one-hit KO anything that does not resist them. So those are going to be important. They're a little bit harder to use. They're not quite as much just buy it and spam it, but those are going to be ones, especially Brack, as that can be a way to kill Kraken and Tiamat, which are two of the fiends that we need to kill in order to win. Finally, Lock decreases the evasion of enemies, primarily fiends. So that is something, especially as the scaling gets higher, it's going to let your fighter hit more frequently. So it's something that you're going to want for the late game, but it's not as important for the early game.
And then to kind of couple off of the lock, it's also dependent on our scaling. So normally you have to have around the 220, 230 mark in order to have completely evasive enemies where you can't hit them outside of getting crits on them. So the higher the scaling goes, the more important lock and its AoE counterpart lock 2 are. With our scaling type, we may or may not need them, so it'll just be up to Link to see if he decides he wants to keep it just in case, or if he decides he's probably not going to need it.
Okay, so we're pretty much good to go out of this black magic shop. So the spells you would buy for sure here on your black magic is Lit 3, and then you can come back and get Brack, Lock later if you want to, but you probably just buy them now, and that's exactly what he's doing. White magic, we've kind of briefly talked about the slots here, but we do want to mention Cure 2, Cure 3. There's 4 levels of curing spells. Level 1 does very, very little. 2, 3 do slightly more each, and then Cure 4, the most important one, fully heals ally. If you are in battle, it also removes status effects. So it will remove stun, it will remove poison, it will not remove stone. That is what Soft does. Now, unfortunately, Soft is not usable in battle, so in most cases, it's not especially useful unless you want to save some money on Soft Potions, which is definitely a reason to buy it at level 1. But Cure 3, really the only spell here that's going to be bought in most seeds by a White Mage. Invis goes into something that's quite important. It's a little bit more of a boss concept, but it adds evasion, which is not going to be used against much. But Invis is the little brother of Invis 2, as it adds a single stack of evasion to one character. And we'll get into that more as we get into boss strategy. So for now, I think we're good to get out of here with, the spells that we've bought. And yeah, Sir Nicholas just a touch, like his restream's a little bit behind, so you'll often see him like being a little bit more patient just as he waits for us to finish explaining things, then he'll get out of there.
Exactly.
So armor. Now, armor is something that I don't want to go too much into the specifics on, just know that early armor is good. And for your fighter, what you're looking for is chain armor or iron armor, and for your mages, you're looking for their bracelets, so silver, gold, copper bracelets in the stores for early game. The other thing that you're looking for late game for armor is going to be pro rings, which is best in slot wrist armor, and the gold bracelets, which are going to be the best armor available for sale for your mages. Now, something we do want to go over very quickly here is that basically people have 4 slots for armor. Now they can equip a chest piece, which is going to be the most important for all classes. They can equip a shield or a pro cape. They can equip a wrist armor, which is a gauntlet, or pro ring, and then they can equip head armor, which is going to be a helmet or a ribbon. So for the most part though, you're going to be focusing on getting a piece of chest plate armor for all of your characters if you can. So in this case, we just buy the chain and more or less move on.
Yeah, and then just to jump in there too, so one of the unique things about the comp that we're running tonight, the Red Mage, can actually wear that chain armor. They're not restricted to bracelets, so if you're paying attention, Link grabbed chain armor for both his fighter and his Red Mage. And then also consider this. This is a good example of what the Shop Shuffle does. Normally, we can't buy silver shields in Canaria, but here they are. I think normally game it's cloth, wooden, chain, and iron armors. The chest pieces are all the vanilla shop sells. So now we've got other options in here as well.
Yeah, so if you have to take one thing away from this armor shop discussion, it's buy chain armor on your fighters and your red mages. Almost always whenever you see it in level 1 magic, or level 1 store.
Yeah, at least for me when I'm ever running the seas, it always feels like chain armor rolls like so much more, it's a lot more easy to purchase. It's a far more inexpensive than the iron armor does. For me, for some reason, iron armor always rolls like several hundred in Canaria, and chain armor always rolls like single or double digits. And I'd much rather spend like 9 gold for decent armor than 800 gold that I don't have for a little bit more for a fighter. So
So you notice Sir Link-a-Lot skipping over the weapon shop, and that is 100% what people will do in this situation. You don't generally need to be swinging much if you have AoE sweeper magic at level 1. If you don't, you know what, check that. But if you do, you know what, skip right over it. Quickly looking at the item shop, the number one thing you're going to be looking for in Canaria, as you are guaranteed to have pures and softs, is any sort of save item. So tents, cabins, and houses. Of course, here we have cabins and houses available, as well as if heal pots are available. Sometimes they're not, and it's good to take a quick mental note that heal pots are available. So Link-a-Lot, quickly checking that, and we're moving on.
Yeah, so one thing to point out too, it does look like we have really good prices for everything today. I think normal vanilla game, the houses are around 2,000 to 3,000. Forgive me, I can't remember all the vanilla numbers off the top of my head. But they're only 500 and some change tonight, so we've got some decent housing prices. Cabins are also really good at 35 gold. So we're gonna be able to go through and get some decent save items ready. So in case we do have to dive some early places that might be a little bit dangerous, we at least don't have to worry about saving in a town and taking some long trek back up there. So Link has gone ahead and saved in the inn in Canaria. Now we're going to make our walk up to Temple of Fiends to see what's going on. And we get an early encounter with some imps, and they're not really showing us anything, so just punching us for 1, which isn't a big deal.
So right off the bat, Sir Link-a-Lot saving out of Temple of Fiends, just in case he takes a wipe here. It's going to prevent him from having to walk back up. And he's going to just start out by checking. Now, something that we mentioned in the flagship reveal is that there are loose items. So Sir Link-a-Lot right away is going to be taking a look at these 3 chests in case it is one of the loose items. So there's a chest in the bottom left and 2 in the top left. And generally speaking, if you have the option to, you should check chests when you're searching for loose items. So I would argue that skipping chests is not something that you should be doing to a great extent as a new player. Just check the chests when you're in the location as best you can.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is, either forget there's something. I hate saying forget there's something there because, learning the maps is something that takes time. Learning where all the chests are is something that takes time. But if you're in a situation where you're running a seed like these flags where you have 2 loose items and you fail to realize there's a bunch of chests in a certain room and you run past it, it's a good way to get really frustrated at the game because, for all you know, if your luck is anything like mine, the one box you skip is the one that has the loose progression in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, it's just no fun. It makes for a very frustrating time as you try to figure out what's going on, so.
Now, Sir Link-a-Lot, so just a quick note on routing here. He decided to do Garland first because we got the an early way to kill Garland. If you don't, you can definitely go punch some imps to go kill Bicky, or to go to level 2 and check the magic there instead. But because we got that, we get to go there right away. Now, because he did not get the ship, basically the options available is he can check 2 chests in Dwarf Cave, or he can go to level 2 magic and Bicky, who has an incentive item. And in 99% of cases, you should go to see level 2 magic to potentially get some better spells, as well as get another guaranteed location.
Yeah, so level 2 white magic. The nice thing is with this party comp, red mages and white mages can both learn everything in the white shop, and then in the black, red and black can learn everything here. So have some okay-ish spells here in the black magic shop. I don't know if there's anything I'd really say is absolutely vital at this stage of the game. There's a couple nice spells to have, but there's nothing that's really like, we absolutely have to have this particular spell.
Mm-hmm. The 2 spells we want to take a look at here, Hold and Blind you essentially never buy. There's niche cases for everything, but we're not going to be talking about. For the purpose of Ducks, Hold and Blind you never buy. Zap and Quad X both have niche uses. Zap can kill anything, but has a relatively low, middling chance depending on the enemy. Quad X will kill anything that has less than 300 HP and does not resist the death element. That takes a little bit more knowledge to get familiar about what does and doesn't, but for the most part, if it's not living, it resists death. That's it. If it doesn't seem to have, life, you probably can't Quad X it. So undead enemies, machines, golems, you can't Quad X. So for now, he could buy something, he could not. If you're going to buy something, probably Quad X, but for the most part, we're going to move on from here.
Yeah, so if we were running this particular seed and we didn't have, say, Lit 3 for sale in Canaria, Zap might be a good pickup because it's at least AoE. So it would give you a way to kill the pirates, but given that we've got a guaranteed tier 3 damage spell, and we've got a lovely pack of 9 pirates that one spell will hit all of, yeah. This is something just kind of put a pin in, like if you're really desperate for magic, depending on how spells land in Elfland, like, yeah, maybe come back for something here, but yeah, nothing really screaming, at least in the black shop. Absolutely grab it. White magic, on the other hand, is a little bit different. So, a couple good spells in here. So, starting at the top, Ruse. So, we talked in the level 1 shop about the Invis, where it gives you 1 stack of evasion. With Invis, you can cast it on anybody in your party. Ruse, unfortunately, is a self-cast. So, at this current stage of the game, the only 2 characters we have that can learn are going to be the Red Mage and the White Mage. The nice thing is even though it's self-cast, it gives you 2 stacks of evasion. So it's a very good way to kind of make sure your guys are defended against those nasty physical attacks later in the game. So it's I'm not going to say it doesn't have like early to mid to late game uses across the board. It's very much far more useful late game, but depending on what kind of scripts and how the randomizer affects the stats for the bosses, like say Lich and Carry, you may find yourself being really glad you grabbed Ruse and in your carry fight. Another good spell here is going to be Harm 4. Yeah, it only affects undead, but Harm 4 being the highest tiered of the 2 here, because if you have Harm 4 in a shop, why would you buy Harm 2 in the same shop? You probably wouldn't. But Harm 4, it's going to do a lot of damage. It has similar damage output to Fade, which is another spell we'll hopefully see here soon. It's just, again, it only affects the undead enemies, so it's not going to affect, any birds you find. It's not going to affect any of the, if you find giants and agamas and Cerberus, it's not going to do anything to them. But as far as any kind of undead, and there are a couple dungeons where it kind of does shine. Harm 4 is a great spell to see at level 2, especially considering you have 2 characters who can cast it, and it's relatively cheap. And then the last spell in here is also pretty good as well, Wall. Effectively, this is a ribbon you can cast on one of your parties to where your character affected by Wall can resist everything. So it lessens damage from elemental spells. It can save you from the instant death skills and spells. It has a lot of really good uses. That's a very great find here at level 2.
So at this scaling, I think we would probably just buy Harm 4 and Wall for our White Mage and move on. The Red Mage, depending on what you want, probably gets Harm 4. Wall's a little bit more optional, potentially. And, maybe later the Red Mage might want Ruse or something like that. But for now, we'll just buy the damage spell and get out of here.
Yeah, I'll be coming back to pick up probably Wall and Ruse on everybody at some point. The one thing I want to note as well, because something I've been paying attention to, I will probably be doing a lot of encounter manipulation because there's not that much of a runoff of a hard reset, but I was able to run all the way from Canary to Provoke with no encounters after first encounter on a power cycle.
Yeah, so you'll see him using some save items and things like that to make sure that he can dodge some encounters, but we're not going to go too much into that for this kind of first stream, but that's definitely something that we'll be talking about in future Duckling boot camps.
Correct. And then just to answer real quick that a question in chat. So Wall does not help you against non-elemental damage. So the big non-elemental damage spells are going to be things like Nuke, Nuclear. I think another one's Swirl. Anything like that, Wall doesn't help you against, but it will cut down damage from things like Blaze, Fire 3, Lit 2, anything that has any kind of elemental aspect to it.
Pirates, pretty straightforward fight. They have no HP, so you can absolutely punch them down at level 2 if you're, fighter and your Red Mage are equipped with any weapon. But Lit 3 takes care of it, no problem at all. One note is that you can kill the pirates before you go over if you have a sweeper, because it will give you the ability to buy some more spells with the extra money. Always, always, always check the item shops, even if you haven't found... if you found kind of everything that you're looking for, because you're always going to be looking for a shop item. There's one item in the game that's going to be located in one of the shops throughout the world, so you have to make sure you're checking until you find that. Something that you want to do as soon as you have some money is what Sir Lancelot's doing on screen right now, is stocking up on a couple Pures, a couple heal pots, and a couple save items. This is really important, so that way you don't get stuck out in the wild later, especially with an early canoe. When you don't have any Pures, for example, and you get poisoned or you get stone touch. So you do want to make sure that you stock up on a couple of those things. Quickly looking through magic, we have cheap iron armor here, which would be a good upgrade for the fighter. However, we don't have enough money for it, so that's fine. It's probably not worth coming back for. Silver bracelets are also fairly cheap. Maybe worth coming back for if we're having a tough time, but for now we're just going to leave, peace out, and go on. The big thing to realize about armor is it's not essential when you have really, really broken early spells, but it can make a huge difference if you can pick it up relatively easily, especially that first, 10, 15 absorb like what we're getting from the chain armor here. So prioritize getting a little bit of early armor, and then don't worry too much about it from that point onwards.
Yep, so as far as thought process right now with what I have, Canoe gives me access to Ice Cave, Crescent Lake, and I can get over to Marsh Cave as well. So those are where my 3 incentives are right now. Ice Cave at my level right now is kind of a dangerous place. What I'm really probably going to do at this point, since I probably could get through Marsh Cave if I really wanted to with what I have, I'm going to actually go get the free incentive in Crescent Lake using encounter manipulation and see if it's maybe a floater or something else that unlocks something first, especially since I'm in Provoke and I have to walk all the way back to Canary to start to get to Marsh Cave anyways.
Yep. So, while he's doing that encounter manipulation walk, I want to talk a little bit about high-level routing strategy. So, high-level routing strategy with loose items is you, generally speaking, want to take locations that have free incentive items first, and then while you're there, open up chests to try and find the loose items, and then prioritize chest density. So what Sir Lancelot's thought process there was entirely right. He's thinking, where are my incentive locations I have available to me? And he just listed the 3 of them out. Those 3, as he mentioned, are Ice Cave, Crescent Lake, where the Circle of Sages is, and because we have early Sages on, we can go there, and Marsh Cave. So that's the first thing that you should always think. Where are my incentive locations that are available? Then you determine which one do you think is the best one for you to go for. In this case, his logic is Ice Cave is too dangerous. 100% agreed. Marsh is far away, maybe doable, but Crescent Lake is basically on the way, and it's free. So I'm going to check Crescent Lake first and then reevaluate my options, and that's exactly what Sir Lancelot's doing right now. Remember, we have early Sages on, so that means that Crescent Lake location, as soon as you can go there, you can get an item.
Yeah, it's not going to be dependent on the Earth Orb being lit. And then just to interject and throw back to our flag reveal a little bit, when we were talking about the open progression, that little part of the river system that we just paddle through, that's our open progression. So that is what's going to allow you to paddle from Provoca down here to Ice Cave and or Volcano and or Crescent Lake. And then another thing we want to talk about real quick as well is you see Sir Lancelot doing that fancy little footwork in and out of the river system. That's kind of a way to show, I'm going to call them free tiles. So the way the game works is when you're walking or doing anything on the overworld, every step you take increases your encounter table, and once it hits certain thresholds, it's going to give you a battle. One of the catches that we found out within the game is that when you're walking onto a river tile or off of a river tile, that encounter table is not moving. So if you're trying to minimize the number of fights you're getting, those are essentially free steps you can take. And there's a couple places within the game with the river systems that really helps out. And that was one of them there. So every time he walked down and then right or backwards, often onto those river tiles, he will never get into a fight on any of those tiles that he's walking on.
So quickly getting into Crescent Lake, checking magic on the way, level 6 magic absolutely stacked. Quickly going through the slots here, once again, level 6 magic is fairly restrictive to red mages, and as if they can't get anything, but they can after promotion. I'm not going to go through exactly what slots, just know that the red mage cannot learn anything right now. The white mage can learn everything but slot 2, so some of these are definitely available, but way too expensive. Now, here we have a couple really important white magic spells. So Fade. Please don't forget Fade. Pro Jared. Please don't forget Fade. Fade is the best damaging spell a white mage can learn. It is the only really all-encompassing damaging spell a white mage can learn, and it turns a white mage into a potent threat on the battlefield. So Fade, always going to be something that you want to pick up as soon as possible, especially if it's low level. Level 6 here, you can't cast it to level 16 anyway, so we're a ways away, but definitely a huge thing to note. Speaking of huge things to note, Life 2, the best spell in the game for reviving a dead character. It's going to revive a dead character and to 100% HP, so Life 2, absolutely something you want to use. Unlike modern RPGs, you can't cast Life in battle, so it's only something you can use after, but it's going to be super important to diving dungeons and all that jazz, so another really important one you want to count out. Finally, Heal 2, the second of 3 AoE healing spells. It's going to be something that you're going to buy if it's lower level. At this level, not nearly so important, especially not when it shares a spell level. Remember, this is one pool of level 6 spells that you're going to be able to cast. I wouldn't even bother picking up Heal 2 even if I had all the money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with that assessment.
When I come back, Fade and Life 2 are priorities. Heal 2, maybe on the Red Mage just to have it, but that's about it.
Yep. Unfortunately, this Fade will not be learnable by the Red Wizard, but that shouldn't be a big deal. I like Esper's comment in chat. Life 2 doesn't matter because Kraken is guaranteed to attack your healers first. That is not coded in, but it does feel like that sometimes.
That's why you have 2 Rezzers.
That's why you have 2 people
bias
who
is a
can cast
thing.
it. Oh yeah. My future self, so we quickly talked about this, but the Black Mage is a female because he's using a sprite package that's changed the sprites. Sir Lancelot going into Black Magic now. Will we see more? The only spell of note here is Ice 3. We're not going to spend a ton of time going over the rest of them, as they're just the AoE sweepers at various, the elemental magic at various levels. Ice 3, the best of them, easily. Sleep 2, not a spell that you will ever buy.
Yeah, and for the price, I mean, if we're really desperate and we have a way to get some levels and spell charges, Ice 3 could do some work for only 2,500 gold, but odds are we're probably not even going to be picking that up or ever using it. So,
yep, yeah. The elemental sweepers, they're kind of they're not interchangeable by any stretch, but you only need a few of them generally speaking, and if you can get them at low level or you get nuke, it kind of just supersedes all the higher level ones anyways. So you don't need to worry so much about if you see Ice 3 at level 6, like being like, oh, I need to go back and pick that up. Unlike Life 2, which Sir Lancelot has made a very, very strong mental note, being like, I need to go back and buy this. Okay, so we've got the tail from the Circle of Sages. That basically means nothing has changed. The tail is something that we're going to be able to use to promote, which is important, but first we're going to need the canoe and the floater in order to get into the air. Since we don't have the floater, the tail does basically nothing at this point. Now we have 2 choices for incentive locations, or else we're going to be on a loose hunt. And incentive locations, way better chance than the loose hunt. So I believe the choices right now are Ice Cave or Marsh. And once again, so routing logic, first, where are my incentive locations? Ice Cave, Marsh. Which one is better for me right now, which is either faster or safer or both? Marsh Cave is going to be both faster and safer than Ice, so we're going to be headed to Marsh, with maybe a pit stop at Elfland to pick up some spells.
yeah, and so the thing Linkalot is doing right here at the moment, too, is he's just trying to, I'd assume he's just trying to check out what the encounter table looks like, get a couple quick levels. So it's far easier to get levels in higher area or higher EXP zones than it is to try and grind them out on ogres. So it was a little unfortunate all we got off the hard reset there with Scorpions and the Anacondas, because, you know, maybe we could have seen the Peds there and that would have been a great XP boost for our guys. But even the pack that we took is going to give us far more EXP than fighting like the 1 ogre 2 creep battle here outside of Elfland.
So, Elfland, one of the most important towns in the game, is it has critical spell slots, level 3 and level 4 magic. So level 3 black magic right off the bat, Warp, a critical utility spell. It's going to take you to the previous location you were at before you entered the floor. So Warp's going to take you up 1 floor essentially, and that's going to be really, really nice for us getting out of Marsh more safely. The other spells here, Fire, another elemental one we don't care about because it's level 1. Slow and Dark, also spells that we will never buy. So Warp, the only one that's worth buying there, and something you definitely want to buy before you dive Marsh if you can. White magic, absolutely nothing we care about for the most part.
No.
Pure's okay. Mute has niche uses, but we're going to move on for the purpose of, you know, new players' mental, how much their mind can hold at the very beginning.
I will note A-Rub's not a terrible spell to have at low levels, especially if you have problems with ribbons, just because of it. It lets you resist death and earth, which is a lot of the instant death spells at that point.
Yeah. Mute has niche uses as well. Pure can be used to replace pure poets, but none of the big important spells that you need to be like, I need to buy this when I see it. Like right now, that's Lit 3, Life 2, Fade. Those are the big spells that you really need to remember at this point.
Mm-hmm. And then just to clarify something too, so when we talk about Warp, it takes you to the last location in the sense of it's only in a dungeon. If you use it on the overworld, it doesn't take you like the last town you visited or the last entrance you walked out of or anything of that nature.
Speaking of importance...
Yeah, go ahead, Jet.
Speaking of important spells, so Exit, kind of the counterpart to Warp. Instead of taking you 1 floor up, it takes you all the way to the entrance, which is better in some locations, worse in some locations. Meanwhile, Cure 4, the best single target healing spell in the game, so you almost always want to pick it up. Unfortunately here it is going to be White Mage only, for the remainder of the seed. So that's something that's a little bit unfortunate, but definitely a priority to pick up on that white mage.
So question in chat, and I'm going to throw it over to our runner real quick, just to interrupt your thought process real fast, chat. So with warp being 3 and exit being 4, with regards to going in and doing our eventual marsh dive here in just a few minutes, have you had any thought as to grinding up a couple levels, get a charge or 2 of each of those to get in and out easier, or are we just going to kind of go in and out without worrying about spell charges for warp or exit?
I actually already have 3 charges of warp if I go buy it for both my red mage and my black mage, which I'm going to. My black mage has 2 level 3s and my red mage has 1, so that's actually enough to get me all the way out if I need to, which considering marsh can be terrible. I'm only level 6, so I have lit 3, so that should be able to basically kill anything I find, but still marsh can be a terrible place, so...
Yep. And if there's no warp, sometimes it is worth trying to get to level 8 if the XP is low enough for that single cast of exit, for example.
Oh boy. Wait till you see level 4 black magic.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, I love that suspenseful. Too suspenseful.
And level 4 black magic, we have nuke. Okay,
Hey,
so
look at
nuke,
that.
of course, is the best AoE non-elemental spell in the game. When you see it, you should buy it if you can. Here's one important thing. If you see nuke, the only other spells that you should ever consider buying at the same level are Fast, Temper, and Lock, because no other spell, there's very niche cases for Ice 3, but basically no other damage spell is going to be better. Fast, Temper, Lock, and maybe Brack all have uses that nuke doesn't 100% replace, but you don't need to spend a lot of mental energy looking at a level with nuke. You just buy nuke and move on, because why should I buy a spell that is almost always worse?
Yep, 100% agreed there. And look, gold bracelets that are extremely pricey over here in Elfland. So if we hit some mother load of gold, yeah, we can probably come back for these a little bit later. Odds are, though, when we're sitting here opening boxes for our loose items, we'll probably come across 1, maybe 2 gold bracelets anyways. So we may not even have to come back and buy those. So something to keep in mind is going to be that hey, we're 23 gold short, so I'm expecting that we're going to see Link take a fight here to get some quick cash.
Yep.
I'm going to grab that second warp charge. But the thing to keep in mind is there's not enough of a difference to warrant an extra 35,000 gold. So if we're still pressed for mage body armor here, and we are able to route back and provoke it, it might not be a bad idea to go back and buy those like 700 gold silver bracelets, because that'll do a lot more for our mages, our white and our blacks, than running around with no body armor, and we'll definitely be able to afford those far easier than we will the 38k gold bracelets there in Elfland.
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. Heading into Marsh, so there's a couple things. Are you going to go to up Derlinkalot first?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so because we have loose items, we are going to check the top chests. And the reason we do this first is just because it's relatively quick and we can just reset out if we don't find anything we want. So there are 4 chests up here that we're going to
tell you I'm not resetting out.
and yeah, we are not resetting out because there is our first loose item. We found the chime, the lute. The wind chime, which is our multi-instrumentalist Sarah, the lute. So that is one of our 2 loose items, absolutely essential, something we're definitely going to want to keep. And yeah, that's just, the importance of why we check these boxes.
And to answer a question in chat from Voltgloss, so the box here that had the 7,100 gold in it, that is a box that is linked down to the other floor on Marsh Cave when you're going south. So we'll point out that room when we run past it. But yeah, that is one of the boxes that is linked in here.
So he is deciding to walk out here, which makes sense. He only has 3 warp charges available. Of course, if he had more, he would definitely warp or exit out of that all the ways to the entrance, save, and then go back down. So this is the shorter walk, which makes a lot of sense.
If I would have had a house, I would have warped out. The fact that I don't have a way to get my magic charges back, that's why I'm not doing it.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, we see the utility of picking up that Harm 4 as well. So this is one of the 2 dungeons really in the game that I like having Harm in. The other one is our other option we could have gone to, which was Ice Cave. So Harm 4 is actually to help us save those lit charges to where if we hit some packs on the way down that are maybe unrunnable and aren't undead, we can keep those lit 3 charges in our pocket and use those. But for anything that's undead in here, Harm 4 will definitely be doing a lot of work.
Just some, careful routing by Sir Lancelot. We're not going to go over anything routing-wise in too much detail, but there's great maps on how to walk around as efficiently as possible to open up all the boxes here.
Yeah, and then just a quick back real quick. That small vertical room on that previous floor that we did not walk into, that is the one where that link chest is for that top floor.
So once again, we still have one loose item, so we are opening all the chests. Once you have both loose items, or you've determined that you can hit go mode without all the loose items, you're going to want to start deciding how many more boxes you want to open. Then that's dependent on gear, what you need to win. But for right now, because we never want to come back here if we can avoid it, we're just definitely going to be opening up all the boxes that we can.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with opening boxes either. I mean, when you're trying to learn the game and have fun, you've got to kind of decide for yourself what you want to take out of any particular seed. Like if you want to run a seed and say, hey, I just want to have some fun, then have some fun. If you want to open up all the boxes in the game and see how high you can get that number, if you can find all 241, more power to you. If on the other hand, you go into it and you say, hey, I want to try and keep my time low, and that's where you can kind of start learning, what do you consider go mode for yourself at the end as far from at least from a gear perspective. You've got a lot of options there, so.
Okay, so a couple key item finds that we've had here. One, we opened that incentive location, and of course it had something that was important to us, the cube. Now the cube is a late game item alongside the chime and the tail. We are not going to be able to use it until we get the floater, which requires both the floater and the canoe. Or sorry, we get the airship. But that is, of course, one of the items that we're going to need to win, so that is good. But critically, we still have not found a way to get out of the inner sea. So that means that the ship is either loose at this point, or it's going to be located in the ice cave.
Could also be a floater.
Yes, it could also be a floater. The other thing I want to note is that we did also find the Thor Hammer. Early casting items are really, really valuable because when your mages have less spell levels or when your mages don't have as good spells, giving the ability to cast Lightning 2 on demand, which is what the Thor Hammer does, an infinite number of times is very, very valuable. So picking up those in early chests, always important, and can be a really good way to get out of a seed with no good early magic.
Yeah, and the other good pickup that we had in there as well was, I think we saw an ice sword in there, which is, I believe it's going to be the third best sword that a fighter can use, so unpromoted, because the only things above that are going to be the Masa and the Sun Sword. So ice sword, not a bad pickup, so that way we can keep the ice sword on, say, the fighter, and we can decide whether we want to throw the Thor Hammer on maybe the white mage or maybe keep it on the fighter as well. So it gives us options, which are really great in this particular game. And then one thing to note here while we're staring at the white magic shop, I can't recall, I'm having a brain fart, Jet, so excuse me if I'm just repeating you from earlier. But Cure 4 being in that second slot, that is unfortunately going to be locked to our white mage. So the only character in our party that's going to learn that super duper heal you for all your damage spell is going to be that white mage.
And that's where that fighter rainbow party really comes into effect. Now, I really like this kind of cleanup decision from Sir Lancelot. This is something that I've seen that I'd learned to do kind of as I got more experienced. But coming back to towns that you were in before, buying your spells before you leave, making sure you never have to come back, as well as stocking up on lots of heal pots, all the spells you could possibly get before diving a dangerous dungeon is a really, really good idea. A single wipe will cost you more time than it did for him to just come back here. And he was going to have to come back here anyway, so he might as well do it now. But
yeah, that's something that you kind of learn with going through the game as well. The most you can do to minimize the number of times you revisit towns or locations, the better off you're going to be. It'll save you a lot of time in the long run over a seed. It'll definitely be a good improvement.
So at this point, we know progression has to be in one of 4 locations. It's either going to be in Matoya's cave in a loose box, Dwarf Cave in a loose box, Ice Cave in a loose box, or the incentive location, or a volcano. So that's now the routing that's going through your head. Now, the key thing to note is that there's only one that's guaranteed to have an incentive location, and that's the Ice Cave. So that is probably the play that you're going to want to make, but it's going to be dangerous, so you might want to grab a couple levels on the way or before you head out there.
Yeah, and there's a couple other options for our progression as well, but I think playing the odds, the ones that you called out, are most likely options that we see here. Because we could do something like we could end up with a fetch quest from, like, we could get like a crystal from Ice Cave, and then we could turn the crystal in and end up with a TNT, and maybe that turns into the key, and now we're stuck with looking at a Canaria Locked as one of our incentive locations.
Yeah.
So there's a few other plays there, but I think the path you just laid out is the most likely. I think we may see a fetch quest, but I think our progression is definitely going to be in Ice. I don't think we'll have a second loose this early.
Yeah, let me rephrase that. It's not that the progression will be there, but it will lead to the progression in one of those locations, because that's all that we have available to us without being able
Correct,
to leave
yeah,
the
right.
NPC.
Yeah, what I'm doing right now, I'm actually going to check my toys just in case for that loose, but the main reason I'm doing that is because of the fact I have to go into Ice or Volcano looking for a loose. I'm going back to pick up these silver bracelets for my mages, as well as the iron armor for my fighter, just in case I have to do something like make a deep dive of like Volcano, that way I don't have to potentially leave carry behind.
Yeah, so this is like a really, once again, more veteran way of thinking, which is that, okay, so armor's not super important once I get a little bit of it, but if I have to do something dangerous that I wasn't expecting to do really early, all of a sudden that armor shoots up in value as I'm going to be diving a more dangerous dungeon earlier than I was kind of anticipating. So I'm going to go back. I'm also going to remove the potential for like Matoya to just have a loose floater, as that would put me a lot farther behind if I was in a race situation, for example. So cleaning up a couple loose ends, getting a bunch more absorb, a nice play from Sir Link-a-Lot here.
So question for you then, Link, since you're running the seed, just get your thoughts on it for our runners, or our viewers rather, I should say. So we're going to check Matoya's. We're going to check her 3 boxes, see if she's got anything good over there. Are you going to go and check Dwarf Cave for the 2 boxes there as well, or are we just going to kind of hope it's not over there?
I'm going to check that as well. I'm going to... I saved in Provoca. I'm not going to do any kind of encounter manipulation. I'm just going to walk the whole way. So if I don't find anything, I can just reset back to Provoca. And then I'm going to go to... I'm debating right now if I want to just do like the first part of Volcano to check for a loose, or just go right for the incentive. And I'm leaning towards the incentive because I have Warp. As well as exits. So Ice Cave is hopefully shouldn't be too terrible.
Yeah, Ice Cave is much more dangerous when you're lacking either mobility spell, and with both Warp and Exit, it's actually quite a bit faster. So definitely something that you should be considering on whether you're going to make the the Volcano play first or the Ice Cave play first.
And then a second question for you, since we're running over here to check, are we worried at all about buying houses, or are we just going to go hit Ice and not worry about having to use a house afterwards?
I'm not going to worry about the house just because of the fact that I can encounter manipulation. So once I get back to the river system, I'm just going to be running from everything and encounter manipulating back to Crescent at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Ice Volcano play is one of the few places where having a house is very nice. Definitely not mandatory by any stretch, but having a house so you can go directly between the two is definitely something that should be considered. Now, what's Sir Link-a-Lot there? He did find the best in-slot armor for the dragon, the best in-slot armor for the knight, which is the dragon armor, but he reset out, and that's because he's going to be going back to the dwarf cave at some point anyways, once he wants to turn in that adamant or TNT, so he can pick it up then. Without the floater, so he can go promote, it's not that important to pick up now, so resetting out makes tons of sense.
Yeah, and this river system we're circling around here now, this is specifically the part that was opened up by the open progression flag. And before you get too far, Link, just another quick question from chat. Have you considered selling Katana, since it's effectively worthless, then going and maybe buying some pro rings?
Yeah, when I get to Crescent, I was going to do that.
Excellent.
Yeah, selling the Katana, useless. It is called a vendor sword for a reason.
Unless you have a thief.
Yes.
And even then, that's why there's 2 of them. One's for the vendor, one's for us to swing. So Ice Cave it is. So we're going to work our way down. We're going to hope that there's nothing super nasty down here. So this is a dungeon that's chock full of undead. So that harm 4 of the spell we grabbed is really going to be paying off until we hit the Frost Giant, Frost Wolf pack, and then I eat my words because it doesn't do anything against them.
And it's unrunnable.
The unrunnable Frost Giant. So this is not a great encounter for this party. We don't have anything that's super effective against it. We don't really want to be using nuke charges. We can get through, absolutely, but not the best encounter in the world for us.
Yeah, and it looks like they had over 300 HP as well on the Frost Giant, so trying to rely on Quad X isn't really going to do us anything either. So this is definitely a fight that we hope we don't see a lot of down here, because it can be a little bit of a drain on resources.
Hey,
So
guess
on
what my
this
next encounter is?
So on this
Deja
floor,
vu.
once we get out of this fight chain, we will be able to use our first kind of warp trick of the run. On this floor, you can do Ice Cave the vanilla way, or we can use warp in the hole between the 3 chests to check all 3 chests at once without having to take any spike tiles, which is a very, very nice way to speed this up quite a bit, as then you only have to take a single trip through instead of 2. So that's what we're seeing Sir Lancelot do right now, and that's why this is so much faster and so much safer with warp.
Hey, it's a ship. And so the warp trick is something neat that we can only really do in the randomizer. So in the vanilla game, warp is in the 3rd slot of the Melman town, and unfortunately that particular spell slot is locked to promotion. And in order to promote, you have to have the airship. But in the vanilla game, this is where the floater comes from. So you can't do one without the other unless you just come back for grins and giggles, which you would probably never do. So warp is definitely going to be something that has a couple different niche uses in it. I think that warp trick here in Ice Cave is really, I think, the biggest one that we really gain from it.
Listener deals.
Everything is unrunnable in this dungeon, it feels like already.
Yeah, so resources are becoming important to conserve. We're down to 4 casts of Lit 3 between our 2 Black Magic casters, and we don't really have too many alternatives outside of, like, I think a single cast of Nuke, perhaps, on both of them. So using that Thor Hammer, really trying to run from encounters, is going to be a critical part of how we survive this Ice Cave. Now, something that Sir Lancelot might do here, depends on if he wants to skip this encounter.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, you're going to warp to not take the unrunnable spike tile again?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah.
I can run from the sharks. I can't run from those.
Yeah, so that's just like a little bit more of a more optimal play, is to warp back to dodge the second take of that unrunnable tile, and instead just take this slightly dangerous but runnable tile. So nice pickup there. On this floor, we have 6 more chests that we definitely want to check, because you never want to come back to Ice Cave for the most part. So he's definitely going to be checking those on the way out of this floor.
Yeah, because at this point, we don't want to leave our second loose behind, and it's starting to become increasingly more likely that maybe we don't need the second loose, but unfortunately it's still way too early to say that for sure, because we have a lot of items in the pool, and we've only really checked a handful of incentive locations so far.
One more spike tile coming up here. We're definitely going to take, we're not necessarily going to kill it, but we have to take it. Nothing worth experience here. We also want to really conserve our resources at this point. So just going to keep trying to run here. One of the big decisions you have to make are when you should run and when you should fight. There's a lot of complex things that come down to, but when you're trying to get through a dangerous dungeon and you have limited charges, like you're relatively low level, you need to be careful with your resources, especially in Ice Cave. So that's why Sir Lancelot's running from a lot of these fights. Yes, they'd be worth decent EXP, but you don't want to get stuck in an unrunnable with no charges left.
And that's kind of the other thing, too, that goes into the fact that it was a smart play to go and pick up the silver bracelets. Because if you're sitting there running, all you're going to do is get attacked most likely, or, cast at or have something done to you that's going to damage you, because you're not doing anything to offset the enemy packs that are fighting you. So instead of sitting there and just getting hit for the absolute maximum unabsorbed damage, hey, at least your silver bracelets are mitigating a lot of it.
And with that, we're exited out, and we get our ship. Now, ship spawning is a interesting thing when you get it in Ice Cave. However, something to keep in mind is that the ship will never spawn outside of the inner sea. So that's something that you always need to keep in mind, is that yes, the perhaps closest dock to it might be, the dock that's south of Provoca, east of Provoca, or the one that is right there, or the one that's near Crescent Lake, but it will always spawn in the inner sea. So it spawns in Provoca.
Yeah, so we're going to go and save. We're going to pop in that boat, and we already have the canal, because I believe we got that from the king right off the bat. So we now can get outside of the inner sea. We have a few more locations opened up to us. We've got another incentive location we can get to, which is going to be Castle Ordeals. don't really have anything over an Earth Cave necessarily, unless we want to gamble on a loose.
Mhm.
And the northern docks are off in these particular flags, so really the only thing we gained by the ship is going to be the Melman location, the Earth Cave for a potential loose, and then Ordeals, because we can't do anything in Titans yet because we don't quite have the Ruby form.
So at this point, we could definitely check Melman for some magic, but I'm going to assume that the play that Sir Lickola's going to make is either to just maybe go to Earth 1 if he wants a few levels, or just go straight to that incentive location. Once again, when you have incentive locations available versus checking for loose, you should almost always do the incentive locations first, because not only are you guaranteed an item, you might also find the loose item while you're there. One of the biggest ways to lose time is to go elsewhere. Now, the one exception to this rule is if you don't think you're ready for that incentive location yet, maybe go do a couple small things. Maybe get a couple levels, buy some more gear, buy some more magic before you do it, but your target should be the incentive location first.
So here's our lovely level 5 spells here in Melman. The biggest one, I think really the only one we're going to really need to pick up here is going to be Invis 2. So if you recall, our Invis spell was level 1, so that gave you a single cast of Invis, or a single stack of evasion on a single character in your party. Invis 2 is that, but it's AoE, so one cast gives you one stack across the board on everybody. It's lucky that it's in the second slot, because even though our red mage can't learn it, once we find the floater and we promote and we have a red wizard, the red wizard can then learn it in that second slot. And having two people who can cast Invis 2 is fantastic, because within 3 rounds, your party can be completely immune to melee attacks outside of the lucky crit, which is a really nice thing for our endgame bosses. And then while we wait for Link to make his way over to the black magic shop, something we did see, so we pointed out that we had the gold bracelets over in Elfland, and then we also have the pro rings over in Crescent Lake. So really, because we've seen where the 2 endgame armors are for our mages, we don't really need to check any more armor shops. We've seen everything we want to see. So at this point, the only purpose of maybe visiting an armor shop would be to sell something, maybe sell some gear for some cash if we're kind of strapped. And then we're probably never going to visit a weapon shop unless it's to sell weapons as well, because there's nothing in the weapon shop that's going to beat what we have at the moment. Black magic, we've got Temper in the first slot. That's really the only spell that I think I would pick up in here. Nice thing again is with that first slot, both the red mage and black mage can learn it. So that'll just make our melee character even more beefy once we get enough casts of him in it.
Yeah, Temper has a couple critical properties, but one is that it's not self-cast, unlike Saber, so we can buff generally speaking, your endgame strategy is to make one very buff melee character to defeat those harder endgame bosses. So that is where Temper comes in, is it's going to increase damage.
Yep, and then just pointing out something as well for any newer runners out there who may not recall from their time in the vanilla game. So Melman's location has neither an item shop nor a clinic. So if you're looking to either buy items or revive party members, you gotta go somewhere else. Melman will not do it for you.
Which is why Melman is the worst town.
Absolutely. That's why the vampire lives nearby.
So Sir Lakelot is making the decision to go to Ordeals with Warp and the only incentive location left. It's kind of a no-brainer here. So also showing off a couple more dead tiles, or like places that cannot cause encounters. So always take this little zigzag path. And we are going to be entering the Castle Ordeals shortly. So once again, the Warp Trick is going to be very, very handy here. It's going to be something that we're going to use to go back if we take a wrong turn. Once again, it's not that Sir Lakelot hasn't read the Nintendo Power. It's that the Castle Ordeals pillars are randomized. So he does not know the correct path through it. So he's going to have to be guess and checking. But Warp makes guess and checking a lot faster.
Yep, and then the other thing too is with that early Ordeals flag on, we don't have the crown, but we can still pop in here and start navigating and trying to guess our way through this lovely pillar maze.
So that second room he got incorrect, but it was short enough that it wasn't really worth a warp charge. Wow, he's pretty so far so good. We'll see if the 4-pillar room causes any problems. Aha, there we go. So this one he knows that he's been to before, so quickly using warp he heads back to the pillar, and he can quickly check the next one. And with that, we're through.
Easy peasy. So Grey Worm apparently migrated today from Volcano, is now living in Ordeals. Lives through a quad X, so has more than 300 HP.
Yeah, I thought I'd try to get some cheeky experience, but he said no.
Yeah. Then go ahead, Jet.
Oh, I was just going to say Volt Gloss in chat saying the chest in the upper right room on the second floor is also linked to the top floor. That is correct. So you do not need to open up that chest in the top right room of the pillar floor.
Yeah, so we're just going to lit through our way down through here. So we've got 3 chests over here on the upper left. We've got 4 on the bottom left. And then we'll have our incentive box. So if we're really lucky, we'll get a... Look at that. There's our key. So Ordeals was absolutely the right call here because we now have our second loot item. So if we're feeling really cheeky, we never technically have to open up another non-incentive box again in this run. I'm going to make a guess that because we haven't really seen any ribbons, we haven't maybe seen any of the, what am I thinking of? Like the defense sword, we haven't seen any of that fun stuff. We'll probably still be opening up a few boxes here and there, but I don't think we'll be opening up every box in the game at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just greed boxes, probably. I've got level 2 wall that 3 characters are going to have, so if I'm really worried about it, I've got that, but...
Yeah, so right now, as Sir Lancelot's going to have to go do a bunch of turn-ins, we can briefly touch on them as he does them, but this is a good opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about how to win. So once again, I mentioned this during the flags, but if you're just joining us, my name's Jat, by the way. I'm joined here in the booth by Elmark, and Sir Lancelot is running for us tonight. Welcome to the Duckling Bootcamp, where we're going through a seed a little bit slower, just to make sure that we can try and get new players an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the game, get their knowledge up, and hopefully, play their first flag or their first 10 flags, their first 100 flags, or maybe play their 1,000th if you're like me. So a little bit about how to win. In this game, you're going to need a number of things to win. To win, you need to defeat Chaos. To win, you need to defeat Chaos. To defeat Chaos, you're going to need the key, the loot, and all 4 orbs lit. So those 4 orbs are located in the top left of our tracker above Sir Lancelot's name. Now the key and the loot, which we both already have, are located in the top right. So check, great. To get the 4 orbs lit, unfortunately, we are going to need a couple other key items, and those 4 key items are located in the bottom right of the tracker. From the left to right, the rod, the oxale, the chime, and the cube, and those are required in order to get to those fiends to light the orbs. So we are still 2 items away from true go mode. However, since we found both loose, we know roughly where they are. They're going to be at one of the incentive turn-ins. Now, outside of what's absolutely mandatory to win, there's also a couple things that we're going to need to consider. One is how we're going to kill things, so making sure that we get a weapon. 2, how we're going to survive things, so potentially trying to find a ribbon, although, as Sir Lancelot mentioned, is having multiple wall casters is a viable alternative. And then potentially also just a little bit about like basic armor and things, but that dragon armor that we found in Dwarf Cave is going to be more than enough. So as far as your checklist right now of like, what do I need to do in order to win? It's basically a ribbon would be nice. Finding a sword is going to be necessary, although there's an incentivized Masa that we're going to be able to rely on. And then we need to find the rod and the oxale.
Yeah, and then there's something else to touch on too with regards to strategy. So we've seen levels 1 through 6 magic, and the only life spell we've seen is life 2 at level 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with life ending up really high at this point, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that our life 1 spell will probably be white wizard locked. I think for me at least 1 ribbon would definitely be, I'd consider that like a win condition. Mm-hmm. Just because I don't want to be diving Topher and have Kraken do Kraken things and just immediately take out my white wizard who is the only one who can cast life, and then get stuck with some really nasty like later bosses, either Tia 2 or maybe some nasty pack in between. So I think for me at least 1 ribbon would be great. Any more than that obviously is just a bonus. So.
Yeah, other bonus item, like I kind of agree. For new players, generally speaking, just say I need a ribbon to win and keep opening boxes until you find one. I think there's opportunities to potentially not do it, but for now, 1 ribbon, that's going to be safe. We did just also see our shop item there, which is the adamant, so he's going to buy that once he gets a couple thousand more gold. And we also see level 7 fast, which is one of the critical late game spells, which is going to allow us to double the hits of whoever fast is cast upon.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. I mean, I say unfortunate because, I don't know why, because we have the tail. We can easily go promote. It's only unfortunate in the sense that we'll still have to just come back and pick it up once we have a little bit more cash. Because the slot that it landed in is, even though we had the cash for it, we didn't have the promotion for it because the slot was Black Wizard locked.
Yeah, a couple more spells there. None of them mattered. Harm 1, Lamp, all spells you're never going to buy, so just ignore them, move on. Fast is what you're looking for. And Sir Linkalot going to go promote. Something that Silky Slim mentioned in chat, Sarda first after floater. A couple of things that you should always be thinking about once you get the floater. 1, what incentives can I turn in? Do I have the slab or the bottle? 2, have I talked to Sarda yet? If you haven't gotten the Ruby, you haven't talked to Sarda, go talk to Sarda. Also the Sages potentially, if you haven't already done them. And then finally 3, if you have the tail and you don't have a black belt, you should almost always just go promote right away so you get maximum levels. So, you know, that can kind of be your promotion checklist. Promote, key items, and keep going.
Yep, and then it doesn't hurt either to always just kind of go back and double check the flags, because we're over here sailing around. But I just want to remind Link that the Canary Locked is an incentive tonight.
Yeah, the reason why I didn't go right to Canary incentive is I wanted to get a promotion, so that way when I'm in the Canary area and all of that, I can buy my spells for my night at that point and be done with spells and everything else, because kind of like how we stated, having a second life caster, that's why I haven't went to Crescent Lake yet, is to pick up Pro Rings, as I want to do that with picking up Life 2 for my Red Wizard.
Excellent.
And he checked the Cardia Isles here, not necessarily just to get gear, he also just wanted to get that money as kind of quickly, so he can...
Yeah, because if we're going to be going back and picking up things like Fade and Life 2, I mean, those weren't cheap. I think Fade was like 16k, Life 2 is 6. The Adamant from the on-rack location was 52 and some change. So we definitely still need a lot of money at this stage of the game. Pro Rings, I think we have 1. We can get 3 more. They were $4,000 a piece, but even right off the bat, we're looking at, you know, we still need around 100,000 gold, and I think we're barely over halfway there.
Killing enemies will definitely help, but, you know, opening boxes can be a faster way as well.
Yeah, a lot of it just kind of depends on the seed. Like, you might luck into like a max gold chest and be set, or you might never find it and just be like, oh, hey, look, it's another 17 gold in this chest. How lucky. So it's a matter of, you know, kill things on the way, open boxes on the way. If you happen to find a really good spike tile that has a good gold yielding enemy on it, yeah, maybe hang out there for a little bit to get all the money you need.
And we are quickly approaching the phase of the game, which is just spam your best AoE sweepers. So now that we have Nuke and we're starting to get a couple charges of it, you definitely can just start reliably casting that just to speed up your menuing, speed up your thought process, how much time you're spending thinking about things. So in this case, Metal Slime's going to be fantastic experience here. So we absolutely want to take them out with that Nuke. They're going to give a bunch of gold, a bunch of EXP. They're also weak to fire, so that's going to be the other thing that can effectively take them out, but not much else can. So that's a good way to get some levels, and then we're going to talk to the robot and probably open up these boxes and be done with Waterfall.
I'm taking the spike tile one more time to get the money, but just because of how much it is, and they were dying to Nuke, and one of them didn't die this time. Oh boy.
I mean, Lit 3 will do the job very slowly in a pinch, but
how about a swing from my knight? That does it too, right?
Metal Slimes have very high absorb, which is defense in this game, so if you don't get a crit, you're basically doing no damage to them, but you can also get crits, and that will half of you'll double your damage, and half of that double damage will ignore the absorb.
Joke's on you, guess who just killed it?
So with that, he's going to be out of spell charges, exiting out, and healing up, and we're going to be carrying on our way.
Yeah, I'm stopping to grab fast for my Black Wizard before I leave.
Yeah, and the Adamant, I assume, as well.
That as well.
Okay, Silky Slim. Sir Linkalot's not predicting so much as saying what's already happened, as he's like 10 seconds ahead of us.
He's the best prognosticator we have.
Yeah.
Then why can't I win every race I'm in?
So yeah, once again, just picking up his spells while he's here. Something that you want to do as best you can, and this is what Sir Lancelot's really prioritized with prioritizing then going shopping, is try and get things out of your mind so you don't have to keep remembering them. So now once he gets the tail, he's like, okay, I'm going to do all my shopping, and then I never need to shop again. And that's a really, really valuable thing to do. He's going to be slightly short on money, which is going to be a little bit unfortunate. So like Life 2 and Fade and stuff are going to be a little bit difficult, but he can basically do everything else.
Yeah,
Now,
so at this point also... No, go ahead, Jet.
Oh, I was just going to say, at this point, what's our routing looking like, AL or Sir Lancelot? Like, what are we thinking about outside of once we get our spells?
I am turning in incentive hunts, basically. I've got that bottle, I'm going to turn that in. The adamant. I also have the key lock, so there's like 3 incentives for me to do right now.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much on spot. I mean, something you want to try and do when you're running this game is minimize your overworld routing, and so try and clear out portions of the world while you're there in that area. So with our routing, we're over there in the top left of the map, which is where the on-rack location is. We say, hey, we've got to go and do. We want to go shopping in the bottom right. We want to go ahead and we want to do some turn-ins that are kind of like in the center-ish of the map. We have some more to the left of that. So the thing you don't want to be doing is like zigzagging across the world. Like you don't want to go down to Canaria Locked, go all the way back up to Gaia, go all the way back down to Crescent Lake, go all the way back over to Dwarf Cave, go all the way back around. You want to try and do as much as you can in one spot before you move on. So going from on-rack to Gaia to check the bottle is a great decision from a routing standpoint because we'd only seen one of the dwarf items at this point. And we just got the TNT from the ferry, so now we know we don't have to go back and double dip the Dwarf Cave location. The other thing that it lets us do as well is there's no visual indicator for it, but every single key item that we get, like we mentioned at the flag reveal, is giving us an extra 5% more EXP. So that's great because the longer the seed goes, the more we're going to want to ramp our levels up to get them to a comfortable level to be able to beat the game with. The other side of the coin, too, is going to be that we want to make sure that we are just minimizing all the times where we spend like double dipping when we shouldn't be, because that's really where a lot of new players will see a lot of their biggest time losses is, like we've been mentioning, is make the right plays from a routing perspective. Like, hey, let's go and hit the guaranteed incentive locations before we start fishing. Like, before we decide, hey, let's dive into Earth Cave and try and find a loose item here. There's 240 boxes in the game. There's only 2 loose items. The odds of them being in a non-incentive dungeon, they're there, but they're much smaller. So it's one of those things where you just want to make those good decisions.
Routing is not an exact science. It can be a little bit challenging. We're even right now, we can give you conflicting information, like do all the incentives, but then do what's close by. For example, like a perfectly valid play right now might be going to go kill Lich while he's in the area. He could turn in the adamant and then decide to go kill Lich, and that would not be incorrect. Versus, instead maybe going to somewhere else to finish his incentive turn-ins, like if he got the slab, for example, he would have the slab available, but he's right on top of Carry and Lich, so you could go kill Carry Lich first. So there's no proper way, or there's no exact right path. Sometimes turning in all the incentive locations takes priority, sometimes doing what's in the area takes priority. You'll get better at that as it goes on, but the one takeaway for now that I want people to think about is focus on doing your incentives first, especially if it's you don't have the airship and you don't yet have the canoe.
Yeah, and then to jump off of that too is find what works for you. Like if you want to do all the incentives and then you decide, like we mentioned, like, hey, I'm in this area, let me just go and take out Lich while I'm here. There's nothing saying that's the wrong play. Make the play that works for you. Like for me approaching the game, I like to kind of clear out quadrants of the game because there's one fiend dungeon in each quadrant of the overworld map essentially. So I like to clear out quadrants and then never go back there. Other people might say, hey, I'm going to go and turn in all of the fetch quest items first so I get the most amount of EXP I can while I'm clearing all these places. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's whatever works for you, just make it, take it, refine it, and run with it.
Yeah. I find the best way to work on routing, honestly, is just to get more veteran players to watch, and they'll often point out things that are optimal in a specific situation. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just like, hey, you were here, go kill Lich, or hey, you really need this incentive item. go search that out before you do the on-rack continent. For example, if you don't have the Oxyale, it might be better to go turn in some items first to try and find that before you go to the on-rack continent, so that way you can kill Kraken while you're there because you have Brack. Look, that's like a 3-stage of like different things you need to be considering. So it can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but just try it, play around with it. You'll get a better hang on it as you go.
Yeah, and then the other thing you'll learn too is you'll kind of see, you can keep a mental checklist of how your seed is going. So we have our tracker, so we can kind of cheat because we've got like the bird in the eye in the sky overview of it. But looking at the flag, the set that we revealed tonight, we know where our Oxyale is going to come from. So we just got the slab from the Titan's Trove location. The slab is going to turn into either the crystal or the crown. Whichever one of those is that we get, when we turn in, it'll give us the other one. And then that'll finally turn into the Oxyale. And so we can deduce that because we've already found both our loose items. We've already gotten from the dwarves, we got both the Masamune and the Power Gauntlet. So both of our equipment pieces are already found. So the only things left that we can possibly find from any of these fetch or main quest NPCs is going to be what's left in this chain to end with the Oxyale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So based off that, Sir Licolot doing a little bit of a proximity route here, mixed with those, prioritizing incentives. So he's prioritizing incentives. Okay, I figured out the last item location. I'm now going to do a proximity earth play check. So I'm going to check some spike tiles to see if I can get a couple levels, as I'm not quite ready for the end game. And then I'm going to dive down and go kill Lich, which is one of the conditions I need to do in order to beat the game while I'm right beside it anyways.
Yep, we're still going to be checking some boxes too, so I'm thinking we're still going to want to find a ribbon. And again, you might hear a lot of people talk about, checking the treasure density places first and making those your priority. But just remember, a lot of the treasure dense locations are the more dangerous locations. And so if you're going to be diving these locations, you want to try and make sure you can clear it on your way down. So yeah, we have Nuke, we have Masa, but we have no elemental defense outside of the wall spell. And so if we maybe get ambushed by somebody, say we get ambushed by a pack of our Hydras and they all happen to have Blaze, because we decided, let's go check the sky location because it's the most chest dense in the game, that can kind of really ruin your day because there's really nothing you can do about it. The best you can do is kind of cross your fingers and hope that your knight gets through it with his dragon armor and he can then solo the entire dungeon. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing wrong with taking like the earth play here and hitting up some locations or hitting up the boxes on the way down and hoping that you get lucky.
Yeah. So yeah, this is what's sometimes considered like greed box checks. Everyone has a slightly definition of what greed boxes are. Some will skip more, some will skip less, but you're definitely not opening the really expensive ones like TFC 3, which is the really long walk around chest on this floor. We might check the Earth Armory, which is Earth 4 at the top, but we're almost certainly going to be skipping the Earth 3 bottom chests. And we also skipped Earth 2 bottom chests, but checked Earth 2 top chests. So every runner is going to have a different definition depending on how desperate you are for an item or gear. You're going to check more or less, and that's just that balancing act that you'll get better at as you play more.
Yeah, exactly, because every time you run a seed, you've got to kind of weigh the risk of checking things. So there's nothing saying we can't go back and say check the bottom of the Earth 4 floor that we're on right now. We're saying there's nothing that's stopping us from going back and checking the bottom of Earth 2. The one thing that we did see, though, however, is that there is a spike tile. Well, we didn't see it, but we all know it. There's a spike tile as you walk into the room at the bottom of Earth 2. And we saw from the first floor that it's I saw sea trolls, I saw lobsters. It may have been the sea snakes for the infamous seafood party platter in there. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say we haven't really seen any dangerous enemies yet in this particular seed. And so there's no better way to find it than diving and running across a spike tile that has these later game enemies in it, because they're always the ones that tend to have all the fun stuff.
Yeah, and the monsters from the sea shrine, I would have taken that if they had ambushed me, so I have no idea if it's an ambush happy party, because that would have been a good way for me to get a few levels, because I do kind of actually really need them.
Yeah, so we're just making our way down to Lich at the moment. As far as anyone wondering if there's like an optimum way to get through a lot of these floors, you know what? You're in luck. As I speak, Jad is posting links to different resources within our Discord as far as step counters go for getting through Earth floors efficiently, so you're not getting lost or bat blocked or anything of that nature. So if you haven't already joined the Discord to see what's going on, you know, feel free. We'll have a link posted here in chat in just a second. You know, we have a ton of resources for the new players who come into the game. We have a plethora of vets and people who are willing to jump in and help out and kind of give some guidance and direction and answer questions and really just do as much as we can to help people learn the game.
And with that, we have our first orblet at the 1 hour. Well, we're not keeping too much track of time here, but at the 1 hour 12-minute mark, with Sir Lancelot waiting for multiple minutes, we already have one of our 4 key orbs lit. And I was going to ask Sir Lancelot if he was going to make this play. This is the play that I would probably have made as well. Proximity routing in the volcano before I go dive some more dangerous things and finish that kind of long fetch quest turn-in. Yep, we're going to dive the volcano. Once again, it's close, it's got some chests we can open, and it's got some spike tiles we can check. So all reasons to come here first. It's not by any means the obvious play or the strictly correct one, but it's also the one that I would have made. And that's something that, once again, you just kind of build up as you play more seeds.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of boxes here. There's a handful of spike tiles. You've got to kill carry anyways, so why not just combine all our needs into one and just go in here and kill it? I think this is the play I would have made as well, so.
Ooh, that's a little bit nasty. So Trance is non-elemental, so even a ribbon will not protect against it. The only thing that will is levels as your MDef increases. But luckily Sir Lancelot able to get away. He's got sufficient levels to at least dodge it some of the time. The volcano armory not providing much of any value here.
Give me a black shirt.
Oh, okay. Black shirt, nice for a few reasons. It's really good armor for your black mage or black wizard. It also casts ice too, as well as providing protection to the ice and time element.
Yeah, so it definitely prevents us from having to go back and drop 40,000 gold for a gold bracelet for our poor little black wizard.
Nibros saying in chat, I think I dive volcano early more than anywhere else. Yeah, that's actually something that's fairly common. It's something that I tended to do a lot too, and I still do it to a certain extent. Checking that that volcano armory floor early is a really good way to get some gear and some money. So it's not a bad play by any stretch. Volcano is one of the friendlier of the Fiend dungeons. In many ways, I would say it is the friendliest of the Fiend dungeons, having not a ton of steps that you need to worry about, as walking on lava does not count as a encounter-causing step. It's also got pretty good chest density, as well as not a huge variety of enemies, so you don't need to worry too much about the different scripts and spells compared to somewhere like Earth.
Yeah, because we've all seen the horror seeds where arachnids roll nasty, and they're all over the Earth dungeon. And I think that's something that, like you were saying, I think that's something Volcano has going for it. It's the breakdown of enemies within the dungeon, outside of like the shuffled spike tiles or the random spike tiles. They're all pretty consistent. You don't have those nasty enemies that are like across the, like 3 or 4 different dungeons everywhere. So I like early Volcano plays, especially because, like you said, you walk on the damage tiles, you totally avoid encounters. If you happen to come across a good spike tile grind, there's a lot of them that you can take advantage of in here and get no extra encounters while you're doing so. So it minimizes the chance of hitting something nasty in here off of a random encounter. So it has a lot of upsides.
Yeah. So quickly speaking about early boss strategies, I was going to talk about it during Lich, but Lich just disappeared to a Masa swing. But if you're at this level and you have a Masa nukes fades, you generally want to go pure offense on most of the early Fiend fights, like the first versions of them. In most cases, that's going to be safer. If you're really low level or you're relying on Brax, for example, to kill Kraken or Tiamat, going slightly more defensive is going to be a good way to, potentially get more casts off. But with this level, this amount of nukes and fades and things, just nuke and fade your way to victory and swing that Masa and kill it before it kills you. So quickly going in to do the Lefane turn-in. This, of course, is going to be required, and you want to make sure that you check your tracker to say, hey, I don't have the Oxale yet. I need to make sure that I do this fetch quest chain before I go to Onrak Continent, because I need the Oxale to get in to kill Kraken. He could, of course, decide to go and go do the chime, and he's probably going to do it while he's here, but do Lefane first, get it out of the way. Maybe you might get an extra level before you go into the Mirage Tower.
I'm actually doing the fetch quest first because
For EXP.
Potential EXP, because I know it's going to lead to the crown. So I'm actually going down here so I can check the spike tile in Trove as well as the 2 spike tiles in Northwest, just to see if maybe there's a good one there. Because I'm level 17, I'd like to just get my levels where I don't even have to worry about Tia or Kraken at this point.
Yep, see, just once again, different routing priorities. And that makes a ton of sense as well. So doing the fetch quest chain early, getting a couple extra EXP boosts, also being able to check a couple tiles so he can be slightly higher level so he doesn't take a wipe in sky. As a wipe in sky is one of the most expensive things you can do, especially if you're taking a bit of a walk and grind as you go. Ale, you want to take Esper's question in chat?
Sure. So, question in chat is when will draft and entrance shuffle be more actively discussed? That's going to be later on within the boot camp. So, the general aim of the boot camp is we want to start off by making sure that people who have maybe never seen the randomizer, but maybe have a little bit of experience with the vanilla game, get them introduced to it with some basic flags. Things like character pool drafting or even just character drafting. And then entrance and entrance floor shuffle. Those are a little bit more advanced because they require a lot more game knowledge. And recognition of like different floors and where you're at. So as we get further into the boot camp, we'll be approaching those a little bit more, and we'll be seeing those actually highlighted in some of our weekly races and demonstrations that we put on.
Yeah, so right now, we're taking the time to go through every spell and things like that. As we go on, we're going to be more like, here's the spells that you're going to buy. This is kind of why, instead of going step by step, we'll be covering slightly less of the flags, other things like that. So if this one was a little bit slow for your taste, and you know a little bit more, stick with us. We will definitely start covering some of the more advanced flag sets, advanced strategies with like entrance floor shuffle and encounter manipulation within dungeons, advanced boss strategies, things like that, enemy weaknesses, etc. Okay, so with that, we are officially in I consider go mode in this game to be when you can kill the remainder of the fiends and enter the Temple of Fiends Revisited. So at this point, I would consider us in go mode with that Oxyale. We just have 2 more fiends to kill. At this point, let's talk a little bit about Topher readiness. With the spells that we have, what are you looking for in order to enter the Temple of Fiends Revisited in terms of potentially gear and levels?
Probably 20, at least 24 on the night. Considering fast is quick, I need a higher level on my Black Wizard as well to have fast for at least Kraken, Tia, and Chaos. My big thing right now is the fact that I still have 0 ribbons. So if I really want to make sure I'm getting through safely, I either need to take a turn to basically wall up 3 characters at that point. So it's like, I'd like to find another ribbon if possible, but if it's not kind of on the way, I'm probably not grabbing it, and I'll just have to be a little bit safer. The reason why I picked, and this is another reason why I grabbed the Oxale first before just going into Mirage, with Lightning 3 being a level 1 spell, I can pretty much just use it going through the entire thing to pick up levels while I'm running through the dungeon to make Mirage better.
Yeah, so a lot of this play that Sir Lancelot's been making has been around how do I make sure my plays are as safe as possible, given that all the options are relatively equal at this point. Like, I need to light 2 more orbs, or I need to light 2 more orbs and turn in some incentive locations. So how can I make that path both fast and safe? And that's why doing this first makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then to jump onto that too, I like the idea of doing all the fetch quest turn-ins before even jumping into one of the final 2, well, I say final 2, but one of the final 2 fiend dungeons. Just because we're not guaranteed to find a good spike tile. So we did have a question in chat about like what spike tiles we'd look for. Because we're looking at the vanilla tiles, I think the big ones everybody would look for would be like either the Agmas or the Eyes, since those are, the 2 more popular ones from the vanilla run. The kicker is, though, we don't know where they're at. So we've skipped a couple chests, or not chests. I'm watching us open up the chest and finding an Excal. But we skipped a couple spike tiles over in Ice Cave. We skipped a couple over in, I believe we skipped a couple in Earth, down on Earth 4. We haven't seen any of the 2 that are behind like the Marsh Locked. or the Marsh Keylock ones, I should say. And I'm not sure it's really worth going back there and hunting for where our magic spike tile is going to be for our grind. So by kind of accepting that we may not be doing a spike tile grind, we're maximizing our EXP by having every single possible key item bonus that we can. And outside of Temple of Fiends Revisited, Sea and Sky are going to be the two best places for EXP in the game. Just because, my rule of thumb is if you're looking for, say we have random spike tiles on, and you happen to find a monster from one of those final 2 Fiend dungeons, it's probably going to be worth a lot of EXP because it is. Same thing holds here. As we're going through, especially as we find all these unrunnables down here in Sea Shrine, it's kind of forcing us to take these levels. And by maximizing our EXP bonus, it's just going to help us even more.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Gloss's question in chat. Maybe Sir Lancelot, our runner, will answer this one. So finding Excalibur now, what's the thinking about putting that on the knight and moving the Masa onto another character?
I probably will when I get to Kraken. I might even do it all the way through Topher just because of the fact that I could put it on like my White Mage. I know we talked about we shouldn't need White Samurai strats, but with the idea that I still have no ribbons, and that's my only cure 4, it might be White Samurai strats at this point.
Yeah, going in without ribbons, a small consideration is just like, if my primary damage either goes down, how do I win? And we have nukes as a backup, but having Excalibur will almost certainly do the trick on all the fiends at this scaling. The big problem with Excalibur is the crit rate's not super high, but with the scaling, it's not as big of a deal. So having a backup weapon user is going to be important. Esper asking a good question in chat as Sir Lancelot kind of onto the Kraken Flare. When do I prioritize speed over looking for spare ribbons? Okay, so this gets into a much bigger discussion, but the question is, it's all about speed. It's just what's speedier, what's your risk of dying and therefore losing a bunch of time versus skipping chests and therefore gaining a bunch of time if you don't die. It's all about risk management more than it is about speed. Ribbons don't care about scaling, so that's one thing you have to consider. However, the fact that bosses have more HP will make it more likely that you see more of their spell pool, therefore making it riskier to go in without a ribbon. So you should really consider boss HP as well as your gear on whether or not you're going to get a ribbon. The other thing is your levels. The higher level you are, the lower chance that the insta-deaths will have of hitting you without a ribbon. And then the last thing is wall. If you have walls, if you get turn order, you basically do have a ribbon. So those are kind of the things that you should be considering. There's no black and white answer, but for now, I would just say probably open chests until you find a single ribbon just for safety, unless you're confident that you're going to either be at a high level, or you have, good ways to kill bosses quickly, or you have multiple wall casts.
Yeah, and to kind of expand on it too, it really depends on what flag set you're playing and what the seed presents you. Like, if you're running a seed and you end up with, like, say you decide you run like a fighter 3 red mage comp and you end up with like life 2 in level 1. You've got 4 life 2 casters. You probably don't care about ribbons as long as you can, you have at least one wall cast somewhere within the pool. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and that's something we can always expand on over the coming 7 weeks of the boot camp, because this is an 8-week-long thing that we're doing. So for the next 2 months on Sunday nights, we're going to be presenting different flag sets. We'll be kind of talking about different focuses for each week. Like, we might do like a shard hunt, we might do black belt strats, or we might do something just fun and crazy off the wall. And then each week we're going to be talking about things that help with that particular seed and flag set that we're running. So the question of when do I prioritize chest versus speed is going to be like an ongoing thing that, I mean, even I, as a runner of the community, I've been here for a couple of years now, even I still am learning things and trying to make what I do work. So.
Mm-hmm. We have another question. Nuke versus temper versus fast against bosses. And this is a really interesting question. The answer is nuanced and a little bit complicated, but first thing, fast is almost always better than temper, but you only need to cast it once. Multiple casts of fast do not stack. So you want to cast fast once, as doubling the hits is almost always going to be better than doing an extra, 10 or 15 damage per hit. Now, whether or not you want to cast nuke or fast against a boss really depends on how much HP you think that boss has, and as well as how strong your melee character is. The stronger your melee character, it's a bit of a sliding scale. If you think the boss does not have a ton of HP and you may only need 1 or 2 swings with your knight, usually I would go with nuke, and the reason for that is you want the nuke. If you don't get turn order and your knight's only going to swing once anyways, the fast cast does nothing. Well, the nuke cast has a chance of killing the boss before it gets a chance to go. However, if the boss is going to take multiple turns, the fast is going to provide more value over the course of the fight, assuming that your knight has a strong enough weapon in order to effectively use it. So it's a little bit of a complex question, but for now, on Kraken, Tia, Chaos, Tia, Chaos, I would generally go with fast. All the bosses before that, most of the time you're just going to be nuking.
Yeah, I think the other side of it too is it all depends on like what level the spells land in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have really low fast and temper, like say the levels 1 and 2, and then your nuke is like level 7. Yeah, I'm gonna go with fast and temper for all the fiends until I, have to start nuking in case maybe things are taking too long. And then the inverse is true. Like if you have fast and temper both at level 8 and nuke is level 1, yeah, I'm probably just gonna go with nuke and hold my fast and temper still chaos.
Maybe actually we'll ask Sir Linklot here. Oh, actually, you're going to be going Brack strats on this Tiamat, aren't you?
We'll see how many Bracks I have because I'm using Lightning 3 to get through instead of nukes. I might just do nuke strats.
Okay. So, will you cast a nuke on Tiamat, or are you going to just cast? Are you going to cast 1 fast or 0 fast on Tiamat?
It would be 0.
Okay, yeah. And why?
Just because with 2 nuke casters and a fade caster, chances are Tia's, unless he rolled stupid high on absorb with the scaling, he's not going to survive it. Most he's got 1500 health, so it should be 2 to 3 rounds potentially.
Yeah. So the fast cast is not going to get you damage, more damage, because your knight's just not going to get enough swings with it to matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. In other cases, with like a black belt, for example, I won't talk too much on this, but if you have a black belt, sometimes it is better to cast fast because your black belt will one-shot him if he gets fast off and the nuke damage just isn't going to matter. Also, same thing if it's really high scaling. If the bosses have a ton of HP, that nuke cast is going to do a very little amount of his health, while the fast cast could really up your damage of like a super-powered melee carry. So.
Yeah, especially as the fights drag on over rounds. Like if you get off a round 1 fast and you've got a fight that's going 9 rounds, if your fighter's swinging every round, you're getting a lot more value out of a fast cast than you would be out of a nuke, as you're using 1 charge versus potentially 8 or 9.
We are not having much luck finding that ribbon, are we?
Nope.
So, at this point, Sir Linklot's opened a lot of boxes, and just unfortunately hasn't found a ribbon, and that's going to happen sometimes. So at that point you have to say, am I going to re-dive a dungeon, or am I just going to go? And I think with the walls plus the kind of mediocre levels, but with the walls as well as numerous life casters, I think you at least try. The other thing of note here is actually he's got really good protection from other things because of that dragon armor plus the black shirt plus the pro rings. So he actually has decent resistances as well, just built into his armor.
Yeah, and the other side of it too is there's still a lot of places with boxes we haven't checked. So like we were talking about the bottom of Earth 2, the bottom of Earth 4 we haven't looked at. We didn't check mermaids at all in sea, so for all we know we've got 3 ribbons sitting all next to each other in the slab room. We haven't checked the couple boxes down in Marshlocked. We skipped Mirage 1, we skipped Sky 1, Sky 2. So, there's a lot of boxes still out there. It just becomes a question of, how much more digging do I want to do just to find 1 ribbon?
Yeah, and I think, sometimes you just got to go. Guardian Marcus asking in chat, is the power bonk not good to equip? So this is something that's interesting, and I get upset at new players when they don't do this, but in this case, Sir Linklot has a good reason, which is that the pro ring is better to equip than the power bonk because it provides that resistance against death. So he's prioritizing that resistance instead of having a head armor that's going to just provide a little bit of extra absorb that honestly isn't going to make a big difference for this knight. The knight getting insta-death down is way more dangerous than him having 8 extra absorb. Or not even. Yeah, like, 8 extra absorb that like a silver helm or something might provide.
Yeah, and if we happen to come across like a ribbon or two, maybe we find a spare, you can always throw it on that knight and then equip the power gauntlet because you would no longer need that pro ring.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's important to recognize that caster items are equipable. Don't just think of them as spell casting. Pro rings, especially the shirts, power bong, especially the shirts. Equip them when you can. They're actually all pretty good late game gear. So another thing to note about opening boxes is sometimes it's not only about opening boxes, it's also about just taking more steps in Sky. That's why Sky 3 is such a good place to open boxes on, because not only are you opening a bunch of very item-dense locations, you're also, you're also getting more opportunities to get high XP enemies as we fight a war mech and we immediately run away. Why did we run away, Sir Link-a-Lot?
I didn't heal myself.
Okay. If you were fully healed, would you have taken that war mech?
I might have thought about it at that point, but the fact that nobody was healed, because I haven't healed at all throughout the entire dungeon, and I was like, yeah, if he swings something bad, it's like, I'm gonna die. And it's like, hey, look, I swung at your knight, and he's dead. It's like, cool, I'm gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, the other thing that I would note is that you're level 24. I feel like you're in a decent position to tackle this scaling of a Temple of Fiends Revisited. So you don't really need those extra levels. The risk is pretty high, though.
Like, if it's something like I'm taking a group of like mud ghouls and sorcerers, I'll take this just because it's easy for me to take down with what I have now. But yeah, the war mech is just was way too much of a risk because of the fact that I wasn't prepared for the fight. If I would have healed beforehand, then maybe, and just see what he does, and if something scary comes out, then try to get away from the fight. But speaking of that.
Speaking of war mechs, something of note is that all the first Fiend refights are shuffled and all the second Fiend refights are shuffled. So the fact that war mech pulls its scripts from the second set is really, really important, because that war mech has 3 possibilities of getting nuke, 4 possibilities of getting a nuclear, and his life casters have less than 400 HP. So that could just be a wipe, which would be absolutely hugely costly and potentially race losing, versus the benefit of getting a little bit more EXP. But with a fully healed party, here we go, we're taking on the war mech. So coming out with some invis strats, he needs to protect against the physical damage here, but this fight he does think is going to take a little bit longer, so we're going to go with fast. Oh, never mind.
I got a free turn was part of it too. That's the reason why I'm actually taking this, is I got a chance to strike first. I'm like, this is actually a really good time to try taking this fight, because I basically get a free turn to set my party up.
Yeah, so he gets the wall off, so insta-deaths are less of a concern on his primary damage dealer. He's also going with a fast, as he knows this is going to be a little bit longer a fight, as well as going with defensive ruse casts, invis 2, etc. At this point, Brack, not a great strategy against Warmech. It's low % chance, but going with defensive strats, tempers, nukes, going with the primary melee damage dealer is going to be the plan. Warmech punching, but with all those evasion stacks, that's only doing 90 damage. But no, that was 90 damage for 1 hit. If he did not stack some evasion on that knight, that could have done well over 400 damage.
Yeah, when we saw the first one, it hit the knight 3 times for 280.
Mm-hmm.
So we already knew going in that Warmech kind of hits a little hard, but has 0 absorb and goes down, and there's a sweet 16,000 EXP for all our party members.
Mm-hmm. Something you have to realize too is that knight has a ton of absorb relative to your other party members, so that was probably a one-shot with, if you had no evasion stacking, all your other mages were getting one-shot almost certainly. And on to Tia. So Tiamat, there's a couple different strategies you can go with. Usually a hybrid strategy is going to work best. A mixture of fades, swings, and then bracks are going to be the safest, the fastest. But if he wants to go more safety, he can go with just nukes, fades, and just go pure damage. Especially at this scaling, that's going to be relatively fast. It's not as fast as like a first turn brack, but it's much, much safer. Knight doing huge damage already.
Yeah, and the nice thing with going with the guaranteed damage is you're not rolling the dice with the 26% chance that Brack has. So, I mean, RNG is going to RNG. You might get it on the first turn, with your Brack. You might not get it until, if you commit to Brack, you might not get it until 13 casts later. So...
Yeah. Committing to Brack also more dangerous when he had limited casts of Brack because of using all those spells earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question in chat, so use Brack instead of Bane on Tia. Yes, you should always use Brack instead of Bane on single enemies, as Brack has a higher hit percentage than Bane does.
Yeah, I think the Nintendo Power Guide kind of did it a disservice because it always talked about, oh, Tia's got a lot of heads, so use Bane for the poison gas. And it's like, yeah, that's not how numbers work.
Yeah, it is correct that Tiamat is weak to poison, so that's why you want to use Bane or Brack, but Brack is just the strictly better spell for a single target. So Sir Licolot going to do his final preparations, buying in Viz 2. He's already bought most of his magic, but he's going to stop in to buy some heal pots, and then we are going to go into the Temple of Fiends Revisited.
Yeah,
so
making sure we have plenty of Pures and Softs going in, because even though we can use the wall spell during combat, that doesn't stop us from getting stone touched or poison touched or anything of that nature. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure we have ways to get rid of poison or stone should either one happen on our dive.
Yep, so Topher checklist. Heals, softs, pures, preferably a ribbon, key, loot, 4 orbs, lit. And so, we don't have a ribbon, but we have some things to mitigate that, and we have all the orbs, we have the key and the loot, we are ready to go. Okay, so let's talk boss strategies while Sir Licolot navigates the Temple of Fiends Revisited. If you need to look this up, I don't think I have a link to a map to it, but it's always the same route. So, watch a race. Yeah.
Hey, look, we found our Agama tile.
Yep.
Should we need to grind later?
Yeah, so
funny thing, my practice that I did earlier today, the eyes were there instead, so...
Yeah, Vorpal Sword, not a bad pickup in our validation chest, as we call it, but definitely not the ribbon we were hoping for.
If only Saber wasn't level 7.
So yeah, going into so like one of the key things with Temple of Fiends Revisited is like what we're going to do with bosses. So remember, the first thing to know is that all the bosses have their scripts and spells shuffled amongst each other, which means that Lich has just as much of a chance as casting Nuke as Chaos does. What this means is that generally speaking, you want to kill all the bosses as quickly as possible to give them the lowest chance of either punching you out or casting large non-elemental AoEs. So with that in mind, some bosses you may need to play slightly more defensive if they have a lot of HP, or they can have potential to one-shot you like Kraken using physical damage, but for the most part, speed and power strats are going to be the way you want to go. So against Lich, with the number of Fade and Nuke charges that we have, you're probably going to, or maybe not Fade, but Nuke at least, you're probably going to want to just go attack, 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 attack. So swing with the Masa or the Excal, swing with maybe the other Masa Wielder, and then cast a couple nukes. Anything you want to add to that, Sir Licolot?
No, that's about right. First ones are just going to kind of be speed and power. I'm not really going to worry about anything else. It shouldn't be too bad, hopefully.
Yeah, the only thing I would change with that strategy is, we're only on the first, we're coming up on the first of the 4 refights. So we've really got 5 bosses ahead of us, so we don't want to really use any of our big power spells until later. So we don't want to use Temper, we don't want to use Fast, we don't want to use Nuke, we don't want to use Fade. The nice thing with Lich is he's still undead, so I'd probably open up with, say, a swing with the Masa, harm 4 on the red and white, and then whatever you want to do with the Black Mage. That might be the kind of way to go. That way you're using your high-powered spells later, and you're not really, like dumping nukes on somebody who might die in just one Masa swing.
Yeah, I think it depends on the other question is the levels. If you have like 9 casts of Nuke, dump away. If you have 1 cast, obviously save it.
I'm going to let you do the command and chat. Oh, there you go, which is a little bit delayed.
And we're already on to carry, so always heal up before your Fiend fights. No matter how weak they are, if you disrespect Lich, you will get nuked. Both your life casters will die. So always, always, always heal up to full health with like the rarest of exceptions, like if you're running out of healing magic. Respect the Fiends, or they will disrespect you back. So yeah, speed and power strats once again. Oh, it looks like he did decide to go with a wall as well as fast, so not purely speed and power. He's worried more about carry surviving a turn or two and potentially getting off a Bane or a Zap. So that's why the wall is the biggest priority. Carry, not a huge physical threat with this particular scaling, but absolutely can be at higher scalings.
Yeah, the next ones are going to be the fun ones because I have to decide how I want to do Kraken.
And with those coupled nukes, carry 2 is down. We're at very good levels here, so you know, that's a good sign, and that's a testament to Sir Lancelot's preparation here. So Kraken, some people call him the final boss, or at least the scariest of the bosses. He is a big physical damage dealer, but you also need to worry about the fact that he could have scripts or spells shuffled into his pool, which makes it so that taking a long time against him can also be dangerous. What's your thoughts, Sir Lancelot?
Be very safe with this fight. With walls, I'm going to basically protect my knight. Yeah, and now I'm going to protect everybody because I just saw what he swung for, so yeah.
Okay, so what he means by that is he's going to be casting, he's going to switch his Black Mage to the front so that the Black Mage can be sacrificed. He's going to go with walls and ruse strats, I'm going to guess. Yeah, so walling one of his life casters, walling his primary damage dealer, and then casting ruse on his knight. So this is what we call defensive strats, so not speed and power, trying to protect himself so that Kraken can't kill him, so then you can kill him more slowly. Now he's continuing with the ruse to make sure that his evasion gets up, which is a nice intermediate, especially considering all his casters have ruse stacks available.
That's going to be fun when you see what happened.
He's trying to save an invis stack, or sorry, he's trying to save a ruse cast, so he's using invis on his knight. And Kraken comes out with Fire 3, so that's not a big deal. That's another kind of free-ish round to get some more defensive buffs up. Now, once again, the fine line between defensive and offensive is always what you're trying to balance. So here he does decide to swing, which I agree with, and Kraken goes down in 1 punch. So, you know, speed and power strats probably would have worked for him there, but of course you don't know how dangerous he is or how much HP or absorb he has. So playing defensive is not always safer, but it often is.
Yeah, and usually Kraken 2 is where everything kind of starts really ramping up. Like occasionally you might see a really nasty carry too, but usually with Kraken 2, that's where you kind of have to, I don't want to say avoid the speed and power, because sometimes that's the only option. As we see Tia 2 doing Tia 2 things and nuking us. But yeah, sometimes, you know, that's where you've got to put up those defenses first and just kind of hope for the best and kind of power your way through it.
Yeah, so what Sir Lancelot is doing here to adjust is he's trying to keep 2 key characters up, a life caster and his primary melee damage dealer. So that's who he's healing. He's healing his life caster and he's healing his primary melee damage dealer. The Black Mage, one of the life casters, can go down. That's not a big deal. But he needs to make sure that those 2 characters stay up, as that's his win condition for the fight and for this Temple of Fiend Revisited as a whole. So he's continuing to prioritize that. We haven't seen how hard Tiamat swings yet, so we're not going to prioritize evasion stacking. We're mostly going to try and get our HP up so that if there's another skill or spell that comes out, we survive it. But, you know, fast tempers, that's going to do the trick. Tiamat 2 goes down, and we just have 1 boss remaining between us and the end of the round.
I do want to point out to you the spell usage there against the Tia fight. So in reacting to the nuke, we dumped the Cure 3s on the White Wizard, we dumped the Cure 4 onto the Knight. Reason for that is the Knight has a much bigger HP pool than the White Wizard did. And because the White Wizard was the only one with the ability to learn a Cure 4 in this particular run, the Cure 4 would do more on the Knight, and then we can have 2 of the Cure 3 casts going on the White Wizard, and that effectively would top them both off. If we had dumped the Cure 4 onto the White Wizard, then dumped the Cure 3s on the Knight would probably still be, I don't want to say all the way in nuke range, but a good decent hit from Tiamat could have still potentially taken the Knight down.
Nuke range, of course, being 400 HP, as that's the max roll of nuke. Another spell that would be helpful, but that we didn't have here against those bigger AoE spells, is Heal 3, as it's going to do pretty solid healing to your whole party. For example, both if your Red Mage and if your Red Wizard and your White Wizard could both cast Heal 3, that's going to heal both of them more than casting Cure 3 individually on each of them. Yes. You generally speaking want... I would also know, I would highly recommend just running from everything in Temple of Fiends Revisited for the most part. Getting EXP and Topher is a very dangerous proposition. So final preparations for Chaos, moving the Knight to a less swung at spot, so that way he survives. The Black Mage really just needs to get off a single cast of Fast, and he's done his job. Otherwise, going with Wall and Evasion stack and getting Wall turnover is huge. How do you lose this fight? The way you lose is your primary melee damage dealer goes down. That is basically it. As long as he's up, you have a chance. So his main responsibility is to keep him alive, and that's why he's casting both Wall and Ruse. Chaos not doing too much, but continuing to stack evasion. This is looking very, very good. Chaos here having between 1,000 and 4,000 HP. Going to use Wall on his second priority, which is his Life Forecaster. The Life Forecaster is Cure Forecaster. The Cure Forecaster is important because he can heal his primary melee damage dealer. Once again, everything is about keeping this knight alive, and if the knight gets nuked but the white mage survives, he can Cure for the knight back up, and that's really, really important. Evasion stacking going off, he's calculating to make sure that he can get up to a total of 6 evasion stacks, and that means either 3 ruses or 6 invis 2s, or a combination of them. At this point, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're, as we see this nuclear coming out and doing nuclear things, we're just kind of keeping what you're doing. We're, like you said, we're getting up those invasion stacks with the Invis 2. We're getting the Temper on the night. We did have a good swing. I think it was 700 and some change. No death there yet. Another 1,000 hit on Chaos. So with the scaling, Chaos has at most 3,000 HP. So he's probably not going to be long for this world at this point. So I'd say probably one more good swing from the knight will do it. Cure 4 top off the night, just in case something goes bad.
And yeah, with that, GG's. Sir Linkalot, congratulations on finishing this Duckling Bootcamp seed. Why don't we do just a quick kind of final thoughts wrap-up thing, and then we will pass this over. Is there anything that you kind of wanted to say, Sir Linkalot, as you wrap things up?
No, I mean, I guess this was a really good way to show the Ducklings. I know, like, you're looking for ribbons. Like, that's usually kind of one of your end game conditions. I need ribbons. Mm-hmm. But if you have Wall at a low level like that, it's nice to find it because you don't have to worry about a life caster for the most part. But if you have, I had 3 characters that can cast Wall. You just kind of have to prioritize, being able to keep your primary damage dealer and at least one of your life casters up with Wall. That's the reason why that spell's there. It's as good as it is. It's a castable ribbon. So if you don't find them, because, once you've cleared areas, things like that, unless you're going to start full clearing, especially when you're racing, that's kind of the idea you have to take. How risky do I want to go? And that's when you have to look at, what were the bosses weighted at? Because, if they were clamped something like 200, 300%, yeah, I'm going to be clearing more, looking for ribbons, because I'm not really going to be able to spend turns getting walls up. I need to spend turns getting evasion up instead.
Mm-hmm. I think not only that, the fact that you also were able to kill bosses relatively quickly makes a big difference too in the safety of the Topher dive. Like, you have Amasa, you have Fast, you have Temper, you have a level 28 fighter. Those are all ways to make Temple of Fiends Revisit a lot safer.
Especially when Kraken 2 rolls like 550 health.
Yeah. Ale, any kind of things that you want to say to wrap us up here?
Yeah, I mean, the big things I want to point out is, just kicking back from the start of the reveal, as always, if you have any questions about the flags, feel free to ask. We're all over the Discord. If you don't want to ask in Discord, like we mentioned, just hit that lovely little question mark button next to the box for the flag that you're unsure about. And that'll really answer a lot of the questions too. That's where a lot of people pull all their information from, obviously, and that's why the tooltips are there to help you out. As far as that goes, I mean, this is the week 1 for the Duckling Bootcamp, so again, if we have more experienced new players in here or veterans, yeah, the flags may seem straightforward, but again, it's really a mix of what the seed actually throws at you and how you react to it as to, what you're going to do with it. So just kind of read through the flags before you run it. There's nothing wrong with hitting that randomize button on it, maybe running a different seed if you want to practice it before you actually submit the official one. And speaking of which, I believe our official week 1 Duckling seed will get posted sometime tomorrow morning by Greggly Puff. Probably I'd say early morning sometime, 8, 10, somewhere in that range. If you have any questions about it before you run it, feel free to ask. We've got a plethora of people who are more than happy to jump in and help out.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up this particular stream. As Ale mentioned, welcome to week 1 of the Duckling Bootcamp. We have 8 more weeks coming up every Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope you will join us for the upcoming ones as we kind of dive deeper into various aspects of the randomizer. If you want to join us, come check out our Discord. We've already seen a link there. Stay tuned tomorrow if you're interested in more Final Fantasy Randomizer. We do have a race coming up between Caleb Versani Wrath and Iron Gall rank match. So if you want to see the absolute opposite of a very standard vanilla-ish gameplay, that's where you'll check that out tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on RPG Limit Break. My name is Jad. I'm joined in the booth by Ale. Thanks again to Darkmoon EX, our restreamer for tonight, as well as Sir Lankalot for running this race. And with that, I hope everyone has a fantastic evening and comes and joins the Duckling Weekly. It's been a blast. Have a good night, everyone.
And make sure you check us out next week as well. So, like we mentioned, the Duckling Bootcamp is going on for a total of 8 weeks, leading up to the Duckling Derby. So next Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern, back here on RPG Limit Break, we'll be here with Week 2 reveal. So make sure you check us out then.
Remember to check out FinalFantasyRandomizer.com for the randomizer itself, as well as being able to run the flags, check out the game, come join the Discord. You can find links for the Discord, the development Discord, right there on the website. And until next week, we will see all of you guys later.